Greetings, traveler. I am Akira, a representative of the Twilight Society and the curator of these tales. Today, we will embark on a journey which is Genshin Impact, breezing through Teyvat Part 2. As always, if you want to support the creator of these works, their Patreon and story link will be in the description. Now, without further ado, buckle up and enjoy the story.
Chapter 26, Crimson Crystal. Both Hu Tao and Yo might somehow manage to take everything from the chest, not leaving a speck of dust behind, but it was quite challenging. They almost had no more space left to put things into. Where is the famed inventory skill when you need it? Fuck, I should have asked for that. Yo might complain, but it was way too late, and besides, it wasn't guaranteed Sia would just give him what he wanted. He should just be happy about the nice bonus of a strong body he got. The moment they left through the portal, they appeared in the same camp they were in before, with the only change of there being Amber, leaning on the entrance of the gate. "Hey there, guys!" She waved at them, both of them looking at her in confusion. "Shouldn't she be with the second group right now? Why is she here?" Yo might asked while gazing at Kia, asking for an explanation. "Well, it appears the second group was so good, they managed to finish the last temple as well, saving us time and effort." Kia laughed, while somewhat happy that he didn't need to go to another boring temple. Amber chimed in and explained. "Well, we managed to finish our temple yesterday, so we moved on to the last one, but as you never showed up and it was getting dark, we decided to enter the last one. We cleared it fairly quickly, and once we got out and you still weren't there, Lisa was worried, so she sent me here to check up on you, whilst the traveler and Lisa went back to the city of Mondstadt." Yo might nodded. "I see. Well, the temple wasn't that hard. We just entered it not too long ago as Kia wanted us to wait till the morning." Amber frowned as she stared at Kia form up close, Kia looking away frantically. "Sir Kia, you were being lazy again, weren't you?" Kia didn't speak and instead shook his hands in denial, but that didn't seem to be working. Amber's gaze turned into that of a slight disgust as she spoke. "You are becoming really irresponsible." After another series of harsh scoldings, the group quickly returned to Mondstadt as the puppy needed immediate healing from the deaconess. As they entered the city, they went towards the direction of the church. Once there, they gently knocked on the large door leading inside. Soon enough, a nun poked her head outside and asked, "Hello, can I do something for you?" Amber explained the situation, making the nun look at them in suspicion, thinking whether they were joking or not. A request to heal a wild animal? That has never happened to them before. Still, she led them inside, towards the deaconess. "Deaconess Barbara, some people are requesting an urgent healing procedure." "I see. I will get to it immediately." A charismatic individual and a gentle voice. Those were the first things Yo might saw. The second thing was a pair of blue eyes, a pair of ash blonde pigtails. Her build was petite, and Yo might guessed her age to be something around 14 to 16 years old. A deaconess that was this young? That's a fantasy world for you, he thought as he stared at the weird, unorthodox style of clothing. She had a pair of white tights, Yo might could have sworn he saw somewhere before. She was in no way dressing up as a nun, nor a deaconess, that's for sure. Her vision was attached to a gold-adorned spellbook with a light blue cover, and a small cross charm hangs at her side, attached to a black strap held together with a gold hoop. Amber brought the puppy to her, and while surprised, Barbara immediately activated her vision, summoning water droplets resembling musical notes that formed a melody loop and healed the puppy fully after a couple of seconds. After healing the puppy, she looked at them with a smile and wondered, "Is anyone else injured?" Her voice was calm and soothing, making it seem like she was whispering whilst talking normally. "No, we are good to go, thank you and bye." Amber gave her a salute, and the rest of the group waved at her, saying their goodbyes. As he was leaving, Yo might couldn't help but feel like there was sadness in her eyes. But he couldn't just care about every random person he met now, could he? As they were coming out of the church, Yo might saw a familiar person in the distance. Isn't that acting Grandmaster Jean? Looks like it. It seems like she is having an argument with someone." Kia revealed a cheeky grin. It's been a long time since someone other than him was being scolded. A woman, in her late 20s, wearing a raven-like mask covering her eyes, was yelling at Jean, who was trying to act calm and collected as always. She was an acting grandmaster. It was below her to just join this woman in her shouting competition. Which is what has brought us to this point in the first place. If you are incapable of promptly dealing with the Storm Terror threat, then leave the defense of Mondstadt to the factory. Some of your knights could be classified as hilichurls at this point. They are too useless. The factory will put an end to the Mondstadt's dragon issue. All we need to do is to bring that monster to the... Monster? Excuse me? Jean frowned, her shoulders stiffening. Yes? What's your point? The woman grinned, knowing she hit the weak spot. Jean took a deep breath and replied, with all due respect, I'd expect a more professional attitude from the factory diplomats. Yet you are saying you want to put an end to one of the four winds of Mondstadt? One of the guardians? I won't be having any of this nonsense in front of the Knights of Favonius. She was seemingly upset but still managed to maintain her composure. The woman in front of her just wanted to make her feel furious, but such light provocation was nothing. The woman giggled as a response. Heh, he. Your guardian is periodically attacking this city, causing both your Dandelion Knight friends and the citizens to suffer. It's not as crazy as you make it sound, but fine, let's end the negotiations for today. At this stage, it's simply an amicable exchange of constructive opinions, no? I reckon you're pretty smart, so you'll see what's better for your people and give in eventually. It's just a matter of time. With that, the woman turned around and left with a smirk on her face. Fine. Do as you wish. Shaking her head, she noticed an arrival of a certain party. Jean's eyes widened and she let out a relaxed smile, seeing this group. Ah, welcome back. I am glad you are safe. Thanks for your help. The elemental flow is now finally stable. The aftermath of Storm Terror's last attack is finally settled for the moment. However, the pressure from the delegation has become too big to be ignored. A delegation? Hu Tao tilted her head. From Liyue Harbor or Inazuma? Jean shook her head. Sneznaya. They choose to follow the god of Cryo. Their envoys go by a particular name, the Factory. Ever heard of them? Hu Tao nodded and her face turned bitter. They are super infamous. They always come during my parting rituals and bother me. What a bunch of rascals. I thought they only operated in the US. What did they want this time? Kia inquired. They proposed we should kill the Storm Terror, or else they will take care of it, and I believe they have enough manpower to beat it, but I simply don't think killing it is the right course of action. The Cryo God's factory has always coveted the Anemo God's power. I don't believe they have Mondstadt's best interests at heart. Jean hung her head low, resting her hand on her chest. I see, the situation is certainly complicated. Yomite thought out loud. So a bitter power struggle is ongoing. To recapitulate it, a different country called Sneznaya wants to take over Mondstadt and its power, and in return, they would take care of the dragon for you. However, you don't wish to kill the dragon. It's actually becoming really cliché, Jean affirmed. Well, you summarized it to the most part, but let's not talk about it here out in the open. Jean let out a tired sigh and continued. We wouldn't want citizens to spread rumors and break into chaos. Let's go back to headquarters. For now, there was something the Traveler Lumen wanted to show us but kept waiting for you guys to arrive first. Sure. I am too tired, but alright. Roger that. The group nodded with some taunts and got moving. Mondstadt and Sneznaya were considered the same in status. Mondstadt was independent and didn't belong to anyone. It was a city of freedom, and despite being regarded as a city, in reality it was a country, a prosperous one at that. Sneznaya diplomats are usually the most aggressive out there. They will get their hands on everything valuable without regard for losing face. Jean mentioned along the way, reaching for the door handle of the entrance to the headquarters. Makes sense, that woman just now was so insufferable. Why is everyone so mean lately? Amber spoke in an irritated voice. They talked for a bit before arriving in front of Jean's office. Once they walked in, the group saw Lisa, who was reading a book sitting on a couch while sipping on her herbal tea, and Lumen, playing with Paimon in her hands, while leaning on a nearby wall with an adorable expression on her face. The moment they stepped inside, both of them stopped their relaxing activities and welcomed them. After a brief period of explanations, Lumen pulled out a burning red crystal seemingly out of nowhere. That thing looks like it's expensive. Any way to check the price, Mr. Pirate? Yomite turned to Kia, who studied it carefully. The bid shall start at 20 million mora. How does that sound? Pretty good. Not going to lie. Looks pretty. Hu Tao chimed in. It fits my clothes. I could wear it as a necklace. Amber beamed. Seeing everyone's nonchalant attitude, Jean sighed. She turned to Lisa and asked, It's a crystal embedded with some kind of dark power. Lisa, are you able to analyze it? Let me take a quick look. She brought a magnifying glass and zoomed in on the structure of the crystal. I can see many impurities within the crystal, but upon further inspection, no, unfortunately not. Give me some time. I will take a look through the library's restricted section. Upon hearing the word library, Yomite's interest piqued. She did say a restricted section, so I doubt I will be able to access it, but the normal section should be fine, right? Once everything has calmed down, Yomite planned on finding some kind of library, but it seems like he didn't have to look too far. It was inside of the Knight's headquarters, waiting for him to explore. Alright, I am counting on you. I will leave the research to you then, Lisa. Lisa nodded. Understood, I will notify you if I make any progress. Though I wouldn't go getting your hopes up that much. I am nothing that amazing. They are incredibly ancient texts, not to mention. She reached her hand towards the crystal, floating in the midair, and quickly pulled it back upon the contact, a red spark burning her glove and a bit of her skin. Ouch. Gosh, that hurt. She caressed the palm of her hand and sighed. It hurts when I touch it. The impurities within the crystal might be behind it. Chapter 27, Honorary, Knight. I see, it seems to be reacting with visions. Lisa snarled under her breath. The impurities and the elemental energy we embody repel each other. As she was grumbling, Jean looked up at Lumen. It's strange though, it doesn't seem to be affecting the traveler, despite her having an access to the elemental abilities. Taken aback by Jean's words, Lumen wasn't entirely sure how to respond. In the end, the only thing she could manage was to awkwardly stay there in silence. Her whole ordeal and her backstory were a secret. So far, only Paimon and Yomite knew about it, and she didn't plan on adding more people to that low count. Yomite immediately knew why she was flipping out. It had to do with the fact that she was not from this world. Well, the same could be said about him. As for now, he didn't plan on telling this to anyone, although he was pretty sure that Lumen already knew about it to some point. She was also currently in his party, so he will have to talk with her about it later on along the road. He was interested in her story a bit. Lisa pulled the damaged glove from her hand and continued. Anyway, the crystal would be better left in the hands of the cutie. It will just be a pain if left with us. Both literally and metaphorically. Lumen's face went from frown to a look of determination before nodding, feeling lucky as the subject changed quick enough for her to escape. Okay. I will keep it. Wait, cutie. She seemed to mishear what was just said to her. Fascinating. Jean mumbled as she was thinking about how unique Lumen was. She then looked at Yomite, another unique individual who didn't appear to wear vision on him, yet managed to defeat Storm Terror. She heard the report from Kia clearly. He was an enigma. They didn't know where he came from, nothing about his abilities, nor if he was an enemy or an ally, but seeing that Kia took him under his wing eased up a lot of her worries. The vision was special, in that it didn't work unless certain conditions were met. First, worthy individuals had to possess it, then, the vision had to be worn somewhere on your clothes or skin where it was visible for others. Similarly, the vision stopped working the moment the user took it off of themselves or handed it to someone else, losing its worth if anyone ever thought about stealing one. And yet, he didn't have one, yet possessed some unknown power. No, now is not the time. She dismissed the thought and glanced back at Lumen. Do you know about anything that makes you special? Lumen lightly shook her head, her palms sweating. She didn't have a talent for lying, but she could keep up her poker face for a while. Ha! I do not know what to make of it either. Jean sighed. Well then, Wanderer Yomite, director of the funeral parlor Hu Tao, and Traveler Lumen, the Knights of Favonius have another favor to ask of you. For your services, please accept the titles of Honorary Knights, and the gratitude of me, the Acting Grand Master. Jean announced, her hand on her chest. Hearing that, Paimon flew around in joy. Honorary Knights of Favonius! Wow! That's amazing! Paimon wants a title as well. Then how about a warm body pillow? Sounds pretty good, I would say. Yomite asked, waiting for someone's confirmation. Lumen shook her head and replied. Emergency ratios, emergency food. I am already getting hungry. A string of saliva ran down her lips as she focused her fervent gaze on the flying chicken. Oh, that might actually be a nice nickname, good one. Yomite nodded. Paimon stomped her small boots in the air and shouted. Hey! That's not the way to talk to your friend. Besides, that joke is getting old. Repetitive jokes aren't funny anymore. And what even is a body pillow? Ahaha, you are better off not knowing. Having already lost interest in the conversation, Hu Tao leaned forward in her normal careless manner, almost falling asleep as she objected. I don't wish to have a title. I would like some reimbursement instead if you don't mind. The contract with the Adventurers Guild I mentioned, for example. It is already done. I let them know, and we've added quite a lot of the benefits. Still, don't go expecting our adventurers to go and die. We want them to survive. Yay! Hu Tao cheered as that was the only thing she came into Mondstadt to do, and she succeeded. We require your continued assistance in finding some answers. Storm Terror's rage, and those strange crimson crystals. I know Mondstadt's peace hangs in the balance. I beg of you. She bowed to them. They needed every bit of assistance they could get. She knew the strongest knights were currently on an expedition with the Grand Master Varka, so they lacked the manpower, and these strangers were quite powerful in her eyes. No, it would be quite rude to call them that. They were honorary knights now. Lumen and Hu Tao looked at Yomite, as he was currently the party leader, and he didn't mind helping, of course for the appropriate price. Sure, let's do it then. Hearing his answer, Jean relaxed and replied, May the wind open our eyes to the truth. I refuse to believe Storm Terror turned against mankind for no reason, despite protecting us for so long. She sighed and continued with her speech. Once you find something, come to me. Likewise, if we find out something we will let you know. All right. Jean stared at them as they walked away, slightly in a daze. She was overworked. Rubbing her temples, she felt that another headache was coming her way. Lisa noticed her pained expression and went to make her a herbal tea. Being the acting Grand Master meant she was overrun by too many responsibilities, jobs, missions, quests, and requests, that she simply couldn't handle all by herself if she didn't give it her all. Every day, whole day without rest, without a day off. That was the motto of the Gunhilder family. Live for Mondstadt, die for Mondstadt. Chapter 28, An Eccentric Bard. As the group disbanded, Paimon dragged Lumen away. She put her small hands on her hips and said, There is something you didn't tell them. The dragon and the crystal weren't the only things we saw. I don't think he was a bad guy. I'd like to investigate him on my own first. Lumen replied with a hesitant gaze. The green-clothed boy who was playing on his lyre, sending pleasant waves of melody to the dragon, didn't seem that dangerous to her. She didn't know why, but she felt like she shouldn't mention him. So you do remember him? That green guy we met before arriving in Mondstadt. It seemed like he could communicate with the dragon. Paimon saw someone run in the distance and muttered. He looked just like that guy down there. Lumen followed her gaze and indeed saw the person Paimon was pointing at. Well, it looks like him, or is it a girl? The exact same shade of green too, what a coincidence. Paimon let out a chuckle, the sound of it undefined. See? I told you. Wait, hold on just a minute. That's the same guy. She panicked and looked around, no longer able to see the man. The green guy had disappeared. Let's follow his elemental trace. We might be still able to get him. Lumen and Paimon said their farewell and left off somewhere. Amber said she was itching to try out her new glider, so she was currently busy with that. Kia left while saying he was going to take a nap. He overused his vision, and he needed rest. He also brought the puppy with him for now, although he wasn't sure what he will do with it. Neither Jean nor Lisa seemed to be surprised, nor question where the wolf cub came from. That only left Hu Tao, who also dipped, telling Yomite she was going to talk with the black-haired lady from the guild about the contract that was established. She wanted to know more details about it. Before she left, Yomite told her to ask the lady behind the counter for new daily missions, as the previous ones have expired and they couldn't collect any rewards from them. After saying goodbye, Yomite found himself standing in front of Angel's Share pub once again. This time, he had both money and the mood to drink as no one was bothering him, although there was still the worry about finding himself a place to stay at. The last time Kia brought him here was by force, but this time, he was alone and planned to enjoy himself fully. Just as he was about to enter, a girl in bright green clothes rushed from his side and touched the doorknob simultaneously as he did. Seeing that her hand was on top of his, holding it gently because of her mistake, she quickly pulled back, apologizing, her face flushed. I am sorry. It's fine, Yomite replied, feeling a bit weirded out by her behavior. She was blushing from touching his hand? How can she get embarrassed about that? Both of them entered the tavern, and Yomite sat down at the bar chair. The girl did the same and sat next to him, planning to order some ale for herself. "What'll it be today?" Charles, the bartender, asked while wiping away at a glass as usual. He turned to Yomite, recalling his face. "If it isn't Kia's brother. I see that you are still alive. Lucky you." Yomite smiled wryly. "Still alive? Well, yeah, Kia is a very interesting person. Anyway, I am here to drink and not to talk about him. I am kind of new when it comes to drinks around these parts, so can you give me a recommendation for today?" "Sure thing, but make sure you have enough Mora, or else I will put it onto Kia's tab." He poured him the special of the day and placed the glass on the table in front of him. "This drink is the strongest we have currently. It was transported from a faraway land called Sneznaya. The drink is called Sika Vodka. No idea what it means, don't ask me. We tried to sell it to a few people already, but they said it was too strong." "Vodka?" Yomite squinted his eyes at the familiar brand. He brought it before his lips, then gulped down the entire contents of the container. Immediately, feeling a hot change inside of his throat and stomach. He wasn't really used to having a heavy drink for the leisure of it. It wasn't something he usually indulged in, but once in a while, it wasn't bad. Back in his world, he indulged in things such as wine, beer, or sake. He never tried anything stronger, but seeing the familiar alcohol he heard so much about in his old world, he couldn't help but want to try it out, now that it was here before his eyes. Yes, today's special is indeed the limited edition Sika Vodka, but so far, no one was able to handle more than 2 shots. Charles turned to the girl sitting next to him and continued. "So, you are here again, Venti the Bard. If I am correct, Master Dialect doesn't allow you to drink as you are still too wet behind your ears. So keep those hands away from my alcohol." The woman giggled and begged with a soothing voice. "I drank lots of drinks, yet too many to remember, so pretty please let me have some, Mr. Bartender." Charles rolled his eyes and replied. "Keep those rhymes away from me, please. I listen enough to bards every day, and at this point, it's hurting my head. Like, for real." Yomite's interest was piqued. "A bard? You are a bard?" Vendi turned and faced Yomite. "I am a bard, big shot, oh yes. Hooray to the 7 gods that bless." Yomite snorted at her reply, and Charles sighed. "This bard comes here almost every single day lately, expecting payment in apples or alcohol. Ho, a bard, how great. I always wanted to listen to one, and it's even a cute girl at that. Sing me something." Yomite anchored his elbow on the table and tucked his fist under his chin, turning his head to look at her. He then grabbed the vodka bottle from the counter and poured himself a few more shots. Charles didn't stop him, as he finally found someone he could use to get rid of the bottle. It would be a shame to just throw it away as it was pretty expensive. After 4 more shots, Yomite could already feel the alcohol now dominating his system. His sight blurred a bit, and his temples pounded. He then reached out his hand to his bag, giving Venti 300 Mora, expecting to hear her beautiful voice, adequate for his payment. He didn't know how much he was supposed to give to a bard, so he didn't give out too much or too little. He felt like listening to something refreshing during his relaxing drinking session. Sometimes it was just better to drink your worries and problems away. In his old world, he always had headphones tucked into his ears. While working, while reading novels, while eating. Pretty much whenever he had the opportunity to. The lack of technology and music was starting to bother Yomite, and it wasn't even 2 days since he arrived here. He would have to do something about this in the future, but he already had a few things on his mind and planned on getting rich by selling his ideas. As such, he wanted to hear the unknown melody and songs of this world. He was even more interested when he noticed that the girl had a lyre, which was an instrument you could almost never even see in the popular genres. "Heh, I'm honored, I'm flattered, this meeting really mattered. But as for the rest, I came to the conclusion, to wake you up from your delusion, I spied my little bundle of joy, but to correct you, I am just a little boy. Tehi!" Venti sang with his calm and soft voice, strumming the lyre and sending Yomite a cute wink afterward. Upon hearing that, Yomite widened his eyes. "You? A boy? No, you are fucking not. Stop spouting jokes. You are clearly a girl." He chuckled, closing his eyes and taking yet another sip of the beverage he bought. It was truly delicious. He may have been a bit drunk, but even then he didn't believe Venti's words one bit. Venti seemed conflicted as he murmured, "No, really, I said, "No. You're fucking." Not. He spelled it out for him, almost crushing the glass in his hands. Okay. Venti recovered from Yomite's sudden outrage and continued singing. Asterisk cough, asterisk cough. Who are you that I should have to lie? When the night comes falling from the sky, hear the voice of the male bard, who present, past, and future sees, whose ears have heard the seven's word, for I am Venti the bard, traveler, musician, and a rhyming star. Also the 3 times best bard of the city of Mondstadt, but that's beside the point. He gloated about his accomplishment towards the end of his introduction. I get it, I wanted you to sing me a song, not to spout these cringeworthy rhymes in a form of a poem. They are killing me, please stop. Yomite let out a cross between a snarl and a groan as he pounded his head onto the table. Charles nodded in agreement. He never really understood the beauty of poems or rhymes, so he was glad when Venti finally stopped. Chapter 29, Purification. Can you not speak like that? Please talk normally. Yomite half smiled at Venti, but his eyes showed no humor at all. He felt like strangling this trap. Yes, that I can do. Is it better now? Thank God. Which one? Depending on your answer, I might reward you with another song. He always laughed at the protagonists who couldn't differentiate guys from girls and mocked them. Now he did the same freaking thing and it was unbearable. Just then, someone entered the tavern and shouted, we finally found him. You can no longer hide, green man. The little flying girl pointed in the direction of Venti the bard, showing a triumphant expression. See, Paimon told you we would find him. It was Lumen and Paimon, the duo that was pursuing Venti since a while ago. They finally found elemental traces and located him inside of this tavern, and to their surprise, Yomite was already sitting right next to him. It seems like the party leader was here before us, Lumen muttered under her breath. She knew he was impressive, but to find the man before them, as expected of him. Wait, you guys, what are you doing here? With his mind swirling in an oasis of sudden confusion, Yomite stared at the duo of troublemakers, without having any idea of what was currently going on. Venti stood up as he immediately recognized them, yelling, that's right. You are the ones that scared Valen away. Valen? Who is that? Paimon doesn't remember anyone with that name. She was holding her head in her arms, yet she couldn't remember no matter how much she tried. The name wasn't familiar to her. Lisa told us already, weren't you listening? That's Storm Terror's real name. Oh yeah, most people seem to call him Storm Terror. Why do you call him Valen? Are you two meant to be close or something? Suspicious. Oh, we are so very close you have no idea, Venti cheerfully replied. Hey, Paimon thinks this guy has a screw loose. I'm sorry for my friend Paimon. Lumen apologized and sat down on a bar chair next to him. My name is Lumen, and you are? Venti put his hand on his chest and introduced himself. I'm Venti the bard. Anyway, from the way you are staring at me, it seems like you want something. So, what is it that you need? HM? You guys met Venti before? Apparently, it's a dude. Funny, right? Yomite let out a humorless chuckle, feeling every tiny bit of pain from that one sentence. Lumen nodded. We know. Anyone could tell. He doesn't look like a girl whatsoever. Is that so? Okay then. Yomite slumped back down onto the table. Was it just him who was baited by this so-called trap? Impossible. I refuse to believe this. He roared in his mind. Given you recognized us, Paimon doesn't believe we need to explain any further. Of course, it's about Storm Terror or Dvalin or whatever. Storm, what was it again? Venti, who tried to be oblivious, was dodging the question the best way he could. Hey! Cut it out with your amnesia act! Paimon shouted as Lumen held her back by her tiny waist, or else she would pounce on him. She was holding Paimon back, but she agreed with her words. Apparently, there are people called Fatri targeting Dvalin, so if by any chance Dvalin is your friend, I am letting you know. Noticing a small change in his expression, Lumen knew that he most likely cared about Dvalin a lot. Charles, the bartender, overheard their small talk and sat down on one of the bar chairs, joining in on their conversation. If you don't mind, I will join you for a bit. So, are people actually hunting that thing now? He poured himself a glass of wine and awaited their response. Lumen nodded. Yes. Acting Grand Master Jean told us a few things about it. If Knights of Favonius agreed to factory terms, they will take care of the dragon. Venti frowned. killed Valen, that's just. Charles sighed. Dragon's been quite the headache for sure. Storm terrors affected our tavern's supply routes, so the variety of wines here has also dropped. As for storm terror itself, I'm not too worried. I think those people who numb themselves with alcohol are just scared out of their wits. But if we do reach the point of no return, then we just need to wait for night to fall. The knight who emerges at night will not just stand idly by. Yomite raised his head, his consciousness dwindling. Batman? Excuse me, who? But Paimon still wonders why Storm Terror had attacked Mondstadt in the first place. How could this happen? Wasn't Valen a protector? Paimon mused as she flew around, sniffing the various bottle caps from beverages, trying to look for something to satiate her sweet tongue. Well, little fairy lady, what's past has passed, I say. There is plenty of mysteries out there ready to be unraveled. Some people have suffered, but life isn't all sweet fruit juice. It also needs some bitter alcohol. These incidents will also become part of our experience. Rather than ask how this could happen, we should look forward to the future to learn about the truth. Accepting the bitter with the sweet is how adults around these parts do things. Once you're ready for the bitter, I'll pour you a special brew. The bearded bartender chuckled. He felt as if he was talking sense to his daughter. The flying cutie pie could indeed leave a deep impression on people, and almost everyone could agree that she was incredibly cute. No! Paimon dislikes bitter. Pour me only sweet things. No bitter. Paimon hates when life becomes bitter. Charles let out another chuckle. No bitter drinks in the future for you then, got it. Lumen pulled out a crystal seemingly out of nowhere and showed it to Venti. We found this. Venti gazed at the crystal wide-eyed. Isn't this? Just then, Paimon noticed something odd and shrieked. What? The crystal has been purified. When? We checked it a few minutes ago, and it was full of impurities. She moved her small head up and down, closing and opening her eyes, yet no matter how she looked, the crystal was of pure blue color instead of the crimson red. Yep, that thing was fully red, even the magician Mill. Even the librarian Lisa was injured while trying to touch it. Yomite also testified, while choking on his words a bit there. Chapter 30. Information Exchange. Valen, the anguish it feels has brought it to tears. It was once such a good child, now so full of rage and suffering. Venti reached his hand to his pocket, and pulled out a smaller version of the crimson crystal. I also came across a teardrop crystal. Can you purify it for me? He handed Lumen the crystal, and she gazed at it intently. Soon enough, the red crystal resonated with something inside of her and slowly changed color, turning into a lighter shade of blue. Hey, how is that possible? Paimon never knew you had such an ability. Lumen shook her head and replied. Neither did I. Something like this is completely new to me. Yomite just rubbed his palms together. He had struck gold with her. It seemed like Lumen had yet another protagonist cheat. He was more than happy for the addition. The more cheat abilities his teammates had, the easier time exploring and fighting monsters would be. Hail the cheats of Ice Sky protagonists. Charles gazed at the weird crystal in her hands and whispered. I believe it would be better for you to go upstairs, where no people are currently staying at. He looked around the pub. Some men were sleeping soundly on their desk and some were laughing out loud whilst listening to the embarrassing tales of their comrades. Things like that should be talked about in private. You never know who is listening. The group agreed with his suggestion and went up to the second floor. Yomite had a bit of a hard time walking up the stairs, but luckily, he managed to successfully do it without falling over. So, what now? Lumen ran her fingers through her hair and closed her eyes. She knew that acting Grand Master Jean told her to gather as much info as possible about the Storm Terror. I think you should answer a few of our questions, wouldn't you agree? She glanced at Venti and observed his reaction. Venti nodded and answered. No problem. You can ask me whatever you want while we are here. TCH. Yomite clicked his tongue, crossing his arms as he rested his back against the door leading to the balcony. Then, are you really a guy? He said the words with his ragged voice, an aroma of alcohol leaving his mouth. Paimon leaned towards Lumen and whispered. Ugh, are we sure we want this drunkard as our leader? He seems pretty unreliable. Paimon thinks the two of us will be enough. She shook her head in response, resting her gaze onto him. We are already signed up as a part of his team, and besides, he might be one of the few people I could talk to about myself. She half smiled, barely flashing her pearly white teeth against her lips, betraying her usual emotionless facade. Yomite was a stranger to her, yet she felt like she had done the right thing by joining his party. She felt at ease. "Oh, I can hear you, I am right here." Venti chuckled and responded. I don't mind, yes, I am indeed a boy. A boy's vessel." Yomite sighed after his answer. As weird as Venti's wording in that phrase seemed to be, it looked like Venti wasn't lying. "Paimon wants to ask some stuff too. Go on, little one." Asterisk. And so the group exchanged some info, mostly regarding Dvalin and its weaknesses, or maybe some ways to convince it. 20 minutes later, they stood up and went downstairs. As they were about to leave, Charles stopped Yomite and handed him another drink. "Use this. It will refreshing your mind immediately. Thanks for helping me get rid of that bottle of cursed alcohol. This one is on the house." Yomite thanked Charles and took a sip of the drink. It tasted like mashed apple juice, dipped in a few cubes of extra cold ice. Immediately, his vision was focused, and he regained his senses. The blurriness within his mind had faded, and he couldn't help but feel impressed at the functionality of this drink. It was simply phenomenal. Something like this would sell in his old world like hotcakes. He gazed at the title of the bottle, which was currently situated on the bar counter in front of him, and it read apple cider. A seemingly common title for a refreshing drink. Charles then further explained that it was ordered by the local tavern patrons often as the last drink of the night, as it was said to have a strong sobering effect. People call it the fast rebirth drink. Ah, but to think that the Sika vodka ended up the same disappointment as last time, how unfortunate. Charles sighed. "HM? What do you mean by that?" Yomite probed. "Well, in the past, there was this wine called Firewater. It was brought into Mondstadt by Snesnian merchants. But Master Dialek has halted the distribution as he passed out for 3 days after downing a single glass of the said alcohol, stating that the people of Mondstadt couldn't handle this." Charles smiled to himself as soon as he remembered the state Master Dialek was in. Laying on the bed, paralyzed. The maids were in uproar and everyone was panicking, thinking that the strong, handsome, brave Master Dialek was poisoned by Snesnian merchants. It was truly funny. A man of multiple identities, the guardian of the night, falling over after 1 glass of alcohol. Interesting. I feel like I could give this piece of info to Kia, in exchange for something valuable. Yomite had an evil glint in his eye. Kia's personality was starting to rub off on him. Charles showed a small grin. "What an evil asshat you are, but remember, you didn't hear it from me. Anyway, Master Dialek dislikes alcohol, so I thought it was just him, not being used to drinking. But oh boy, was I wrong. I, myself, was out for a while after trying out that wine. Never again am I going to taste a beverage from Snesnaya. This one was a failure just like the Firewater wine." The group laughed at his words, and Yomite handed him the payment for the stuff he drank. "If it wasn't for the fact that the bottle of that thing cost so much, I wouldn't even require more from you, as you helped me out. But in the future, you could order a few drinks for free." They said their farewells, and Yomite and his group left the tavern in high spirits. Chapter 31. Travelers from Outer World. Once outside, Venti looked around and the place was barren of people. Aiming his hand upward, he cast a soundproof air barrier. The group looked around in wonder, watching as a green barrier surrounded them. "Forgive me for this, but the real talk begins now. I couldn't activate the barrier inside. Traveler Lumen, you really do have some wonderful abilities. Someone like you is going to end up getting written into Bard's poems. Oh, a hero so bright should she stand in the light. Though stand in the shade and you will be met by a blade." He turned to Yomite and continued, his voice calm. "And so will you, another otherworldly traveler." "Huh? What was that?" Yomite unsheathed his claymore and swung it towards Venti, stopping right in front of his forehead, the gust of wind stirring his hair. "How much do you know?" "Bardai?" He knew there was something fishy about him from the start, and he never really trusted him. Although he wasn't afraid of revealing his strength and abilities, his background was a different case, and now, a random bard knew about it. How could he not get angry? Lumen and Paimon were startled by his sudden attack, yet Venti didn't even blink. "I know a lot, and not just me. Each Archon had noticed your presence the moment you stepped into this world. Some might have ulterior motives, some might not care." He glanced at Lumen and continued. "As for her, only I found out so far, but soon, others will know too. I don't know what your objective is in this world, but be sure to know that there are entities beyond your comprehension and your ability to handle." Yomite scoffed. "Are you trying to blackmail us?" If so, then you are knocking on the wrong door. We will take you on right here. No. Not at all. I support freedom above everything else. I am not against you living in this world. It would be unbefitting of me as an Archon. Archon? As in one of the gods mentioned before? Lumen pondered. Gods? Yomite frowned. This little trap was a god? Were gods just casually roaming around the city and entering taverns? A god? You didn't mention this back at the pub. If I remember correctly, you are the god of wind and freedom, Barbatos, right? Lumen concluded. She was about 80% sure that he was the one. During the fight against the Storm Terror, she heard a voice that was very similar to his. It was a voice of a person that was helping her float in the sky, to fend off Storm Terror before Yomite showed up. Barbatos! This green-clothed twerp is... There is no way! Paimon exclaimed in shock, pursuing her lips. Yes, precisely. I know it's a little bit unbelievable, but trust me. Also, don't worry, I am not mad that you borrowed my power from the Statue of the Seven. Don't mind it. Lumen clenched her fists. I see, I am glad, I was searching for you. She had numerous questions, but currently, the biggest one was regarding her brother. Was he alive? Dead? Injured? Did he leave this world without her? She knew all of these options were possible, yet silently, she was hoping he was alive and well somewhere out there. So what's your plan now? You decided to speak to us and reveal your identity. That means you want something. Yomite questioned as he sheathed his claymore back into its scabbard. For now, he would just observe him. That's totally true. Vendi bit his bottom lip. Look, I personally won't force you at all, but still, I ask you to help me. I wish to save Dvalin, and I need your help for that. Help with what exactly? If you are a god, shouldn't you have enough power to just do anything you want to? It's just one dragon after all. Usually, dragons were below gods or even lesser gods. While there certainly might have been some dragons that were above gods in some of the novels he read, Yomite managed to injure Storm Terror relatively easily, and it didn't seem like this type of dragon was that strong. Well, the thing is, I am most likely the weakest out of all Archons out there. Venti shyly smiled, scratching his cheek. I am not sure what to do yet, but once I have a plan in mind, I would require your assistance, and maybe even the assistance of Knights of Favonius, as I've seen that some of them genuinely wish to help Dvalin, and not slay him. He sighed and continued. Anyway, even if Dvalin is not taken down, his life will still wither away in the breeze. He will burn himself down in the flames of anger. I need to stop this. I also feel sorry for Dvalin, Lumen stated. I will certainly try to help. In exchange, will you promise me to find one person for me? Thank you for that, and you for purifying the teardrop crystal. Of course, I will help you with anything I can. Right now I have to think about the plans that are to follow, although now that I have talked to you, I have a clearer picture in mind. Oh, and what might that be? Paimon intruded. Seeing this tear has brought to mind a friend so dear. Anyway, I gotta go running. I will meet you guys later, once I had figured things out. Hey! Where are you going? To the symbol of Mondstadt's hero. See you there the day after tomorrow night. By then, I would have a plan in mind. Bye! Vendi winked at them as he ran off. Lumen, what do you make of that? Yomite scowled at the figure of the running bard, disappearing in the distance. This trap as you put him, we should keep an eye on him, wouldn't you agree? She turned towards him, who was also contemplating himself. He knew that this Vendi the bard had some connection to the dragon, and since their goal was to learn something about the Storm Terror, then following him would be the best course of action. In addition to that, Vendi also knew their identities and proclaimed himself as a god. Yomite planned on researching more about him, but first. God, I need a shower. Chapter 32, Resin Moon Inn. After Venti left, the group met up with Hu Tao, who seemed to be acting high and mighty, as if she had done something good and expected some form of praise. Yomite was afraid to ask what happened, but the curiosity got the best of him. Luckily, it wasn't bad at all. It was great, in fact. Apparently, after fixating the contract with the Adventurers Guild, Hu Tao was bored out of her mind, so she went back to the Knights' headquarters and talked to Jean, telling her that the inn was closed down and that they had nowhere to rest. Jean knew about this, of course, as she was the one that told them about it, but she thought Yomite and his group had already found some place to stay. But it appeared they didn't. She stormed the inn, trying to convince the owner to allow them to stay. The owner was hesitant at first, But when she mentioned that they managed to drive Storm Terror away, he immediately agreed, saying he would even give them a discount for multiple people. Once in a while, Hu Tao actually managed to impress, in a good sense. After showering her with praises, the group was headed towards the inn. Walking for a while, the signboard of an inn called Resin Moon came into view. The logo made of a crescent moon could be seen, easily recognizable. The building seemed to be 3 stories tall. It was made out of wood and bricks and looked considerably sturdy. When they passed through the double doors, the first floor appeared to be a bar but also resembled a dining room. On the right side was a counter, and on the left side, a staircase leading to the second floor could be seen. "Welcome. I've been informed of your arrival. We will make special arrangements for you. Is it for a meal or to stay for the night?" A younger girl in maid clothes, staying behind the counter, cheerfully called out to them. Maid uniform, huh, nice. A pretty-looking girl with blonde hair tied in a ponytail. She felt like a very lively person. Yomite guessed her age to be around 14 years old. "We would like to stay. How much does it cost per night?" "For one night, with a meal included in the morning and evening, is 200 mora. Oh, and pay in advance, okay?" 200 mora. He couldn't decide whether that was cheap or expensive. Well, he thought it was probably pretty cheap, as Hu Tao mentioned they even gave them a discount of some sort. He pulled out 6,000 mora from his bag and said, "For now, we are staying for 1 month. This should be enough, right?" "Yes, for a single room, but seeing as there are 3 of you, then, what about the rooms? Although there are double and triple rooms which are quite huge." The girl looked at Yomite and his party with curiosity. She was in her puberty after all, and seeing that the guy in front of her had 2 beauties at his side, served all kinds of fantasies in her head. "Hey, the triple room please." Yomite said that without any hesitation, handing her more mora. Wait, in 1 triple room? All 3 of you?" The inn's girl, with a reddened face, looked alternatively between Yomite, Hu Tao, and Lumen. Yomite glanced back at his party and asked, "Is that all right?" Both Hu Tao and Lumen didn't seem to mind, but there was one person, or rather, a fairy, that wanted to complain but couldn't. It was Paimon. Lumen told her to stay hidden so that they could sneak her in with them without having to pay for an extra head, and while it might have been a good idea, she was regretting accepting it now. Paimon felt like she should warn her friend, as their leader Ugly Dragon Tattoo was leading her to a wolf's nest, ready to be devoured. "He better not try anything while I am there, or else I will punch him," she thought to herself as she huffed. The young girl corrected her posture, but when Yomite looked at her, her face became flushed once more. "TR triple room in this kind of situation, in other words, 3 people, amazing. How, lewd." The girl's mind had gone for a trip. She took something from inside the counter that looked like a hotel register, opened it in front of him, and presented a quill pen dabbed with ink with her trembling hand. Then, please sign here." Yomite grabbed the pen from her shaking hand and signed it as his Sha. "Well then, this is your room key. Don't lose it. The location is on the 3rd floor, the innermost room. It's the best and biggest room that faces the sun. The toilet and the magical device for showering are on the 1st floor. Meals are here. If you don't mind me asking, are you T3D doing that?" Just then, an older woman, presumably also an employee from the establishment, appeared behind the young girl and dragged her away behind the double doors leading to the kitchen. Yomite could hear that the girl from before was being scolded by either that older woman or the owner itself. For a moment Yomite felt his cheek twitch, then he assumed his calm and sat down on a seat. Immediately the girl from before came as the waitress in a maid uniform and said with a reddened face, "I am sorry for before." Although she apologized, she couldn't hide the curiosity in her eyes. "Want to eat breakfast?" Yes, we would like that, please." Then, I'll make something light, so wait for a little." You should check your room now and take a short break." With that she dashed off, still feeling embarrassed and deliberating about what they could be doing during that short break. "Got it." Yomite helplessly sighed. He forgot how kids in puberty acted. The group went up the stairs once Yomite received the key. He opened the door of the innermost room on the 3rd floor. The room was huge and consisted of 3 beds and desks, a couple of chairs, and a few closets. "All right, lay down for a bit and make yourself comfortable. We will be eating in a few minutes." The group nodded, and just as Lumen was about to place some of her things on her desk, Paimon materialized herself and began screeching at him. "Don't you dare try something! Ugly tattoo! Humph! I will keep my eyes open at all times. Huh? Try something? What do you mean? Yomite acted obliviously and felt like teasing the little cutie. Well, you know that when you try to just know that Paimon is watching your every move. With that, she disappeared and both Lumen and Hu Tao questioned what she wanted to say. Yomite felt great after obtaining a temporary home for himself. What he wanted the most right now was to take a shower. Of course, he would like to just lay down on the bed, albeit he was too messy to do so. 10 or so minutes of relaxing and a small chatter later, the group left the room. Yomite locked the door to their room, and all three of them went downstairs. On their way there, they could already smell something good. Here you go. Sorry to keep you waiting. Once they sat down on their seats in the dining room, a soup and something that looked like a sandwich and salad were carried over. Lumen was salivating. She hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon. Earlier, she asked Paimon whether she wanted to eat as well, but apparently, she wasn't feeling hungry, which was unusual for her. She concluded that Yomite must have angered her somehow. Hu Tao dug in before anyone else could even smell the aroma, and Yomite slowly blew on the hot soup, carefully putting it in his mouth. Delicious. Chapter 33. What are you doing? After the breakfast, Yomite handed the keys to their room to Lumen as she seemed more reliable than Hu Tao. She and Hu Tao went upstairs and meanwhile, Yomite went to take a shower. Finally, after fighting so much, blood and everything else sprayed on me. He hadn't showered since coming to this world, and with the constant onslaught of fights, his skin was greasy and sticky and just plain unpleasant to have to live in. Same could be said about his hair. Not as a Japanese person, but as a person overall, he couldn't lay down in bed while being dirty. He simply loathed it. Glancing at the magical tool in front of him, Yomite wondered how it worked. He noticed a lack of technology in this world as most things were fueled by magic. He turned the knob but couldn't get the water to stay at a temperature that was just right, so he settled for just a little too hot, and hissed softly as it rained down on his body. Now that I think about it, my clothes are dirty too. I doubt there are any washing machines around. I guess I will have to do it with my own hands. He breathed heavily for a few moments as he watched the water dye his darker skin pink. But soon his body adjusted to the heat, and he realized that it isn't actually that bad and that he actually kinda enjoyed the tingling feeling the water brought, figuring that the extra heat would deal better damage to the dirt and blood that covered his skin. I might as well just do it now. He grabbed his clothes, the clothes that were granted to him by the goddess Sia together with this body, and started scrubbing. The soap was a bit weird. Unlike the various soaps of his world, this one looked like a budget version where you could barely even smell a nice fragrance. It seemed like soap in this world was a rarity, so they produced it in small bulks of scuffed versions. Yomite thought that might have been the case for common folks, but the royalty definitely had better soaps. I need to buy some clothes later once I have time. After 30 long and devastatingly boring minutes he was finished, and went back to his room and a towel he found, ignoring the look of the perverted teen behind the counter. His clothes had to dry up, there was nothing he could do about it. Not having another set of clothes was painful, and he wasn't willing to stand in the bathroom until his clothes dried off, that's for sure. Once he arrived in his room, he noticed Lumen, sleeping soundly on her bed and Hu Tao jolting from side to side on the bed of her own, humming a sly familiar tune to herself. Assistant Kun, I thought you have died. I was about to rush in and perform a burial ceremony for you. I have waited for so long and I am very much bored. Let's go outside to venture. Don't you see? I have no clothes to speak of, we can't go out anytime soon. He showed her his wet clothes and hung them on a plastic wire near the window, right as the rays of morning sunshine welcomed him. Would take a few hours, but they will dry off eventually, he thought as he stared at the crowded street outside. It seemed like people were more willing to show themselves after they learned that Storm Terror was badly injured and had to retreat. A sudden realization hit Hu Tao. We can't go outside like this. That's what I told you before. You can go by yourself if you want to. I won't stop you. Yomite helplessly sighed and sat down on his bed. He glanced at the sleeping Lumen on the bed in front of him and wondered why she was so tired. By myself? That's just not fun. Let's take the flying fairy with us and prank her. Hearing those words, Paimon appeared next to the sleeping Lumen and folded her small hands. Paimon is here. Paimon can hear everything and warns you not to try something like that. Yomite gave Paimon one side glance before he said, Well, we will let Lumen sleep, and once my clothes dry off, we can go to do the daily quests. Amber did mention they finished 2 temples in a row, and they didn't get any sleep, so that would explain why she is so tired. Hu Tao chimed in and took a look at Yomite's wet clothes. She stood up and placed her hands on them. What is she up to now? He felt warning signs activate inside of him. Something bad was about to happen. Oh, what are you doing? Drying your clothes off, Hu Tao cheerfully replied. You can do that? Yep. My vision is pyro, remember? As long as I keep on concentrating, things will go smoothly. I swear, if my clothes get burned. Yomite sighed as he stared at her. He could see that she was paying attention to what she was currently doing, so nothing bad could happen out of that. But he spoke too soon. But where would be the fun in that? Let's make it more exciting. Hu Tao picked up his clothes and put them on her bed. She shifted and used one of her hands as a support, feeling the ache in her wrists from holding her waist and feeling her legs wobble slightly. It's been a long time since I did this. Hopefully I won't fall. What the? Yomite couldn't understand what was happening. In front of him stood Hu Tao, doing handstands with one arm, while drying his clothes with the other. You said you need to concentrate. What the hell are you doing? Relax. I am training my mind, body, and my vision at the same time. Aren't I a genius? I swear if you burn my clothes I will be calling you Lolita until the day I die. Chapter 34. Okay. Hu Tao had finished drying his clothes off. Luckily nothing caught on fire, and his clothes were also fine. Currently, they were on their way to the guild to pick up their daily quests. Lolitail, move it. Hey! You said you would only call me like that if I were to burn them. I did nothing wrong. I changed my mind. They walked as they bantered. The stress he felt during those dark 15 minutes of helplessness was enough to piss him off for the rest of the day. Lumen was still sleeping, and Paimon didn't want to join them, so it was just the 2 of them now. He left Paimon 2,000 mora so she could go and buy herself something if she was hungry. However, she said she wasn't going to take the bait. Luring the tiger away from its mountain. HMPF. Paimon will be protecting Lumen so that you won't pull a fast one on her. Leaving behind their angry flying companion, the duo embarked on a journey. They had plenty of time to spare until tomorrow night. As they checked in the guild, Catherine gave them their daily quests, and they left Mondstadt. The East Forest was a distance of 20 minutes on foot from the town of Mondstadt. Yomite hoped they could ride a carriage if it passed through, but unfortunately, not one carriage passed by. Just my shitty luck. I really wanted to see horses, oh well. Exactly 20 minutes later, they had arrived at the East Forest. The daily missions weren't really that hard. Most of them were about collecting some ores and herbs. He could leave that to Hu Tao, as he was pretty sure she saw things like wolf hooks before. He had no idea what those were. Although come to think of it, Charles did mention there was a special drink called wolfhook juice, so I guess that's what it's made of. After collecting the necessary items, the last quest was hilichurl extermination in one sector of a forest called Wolvendom. Luckily they just picked up a few wolf hooks on the said location and didn't have to move anywhere. What he currently wanted the most was a map. Something he could navigate with. Fortunately, this forest was the same location he was transferred to a few days ago, and he had Hu Tao with him, so it wasn't that hard to find, but a map was a must. He will have to buy one later down the road. The quest states that we should exterminate a hilichurl camp, but which one? There are bound to be more. They advanced towards the dense forest while carefully checking the surroundings, trying to find any hilichurls. Both of them were startled when they suddenly heard the cry of birds and noticed the presence of small animals shaking the trees inside the forest. It was only vague, but Yomite knew there were signs of a presence in their surroundings. Where is it? What kind of creature was it? He calmly scanned his surroundings. He could feel some kind of enmity projected towards them. He didn't know if it was another perk of his new body, but he could clearly feel someone's gaze, filled with hostility. Be careful. Assistant Kun. There's something here. Hu Tao noticed so as well and pulled out her polearm. She pointed to the depths of the forest with her gaze, shifting to a combat stance. While waiting for any sign of movement, a black shadow jumped out from the forest and attacked them. Yomite twisted his body in a hurry and evaded it, easily able to see through its movement. Gray hair with a dark aura was extending along its body. Although it was approximately the size of a large breed of a dog, it wasn't that cute. A wolf. A ferocious one at that. Its size was much smaller than that of the pup they found in the domain though, so he really wondered how big will that pup be once it grows up. When he confronted the one wolf that jumped out, he saw a second one spring out from another direction aiming at Hu Tao. Hu Tao rushed to face it from the front and drove a full-body blow into the snout of the wolf. It ate a mouthful of her fist, and straight after, it fell to the ground just like that, with a final twitch, closing its eyes forever. Surely a one-hit kill. What the hell? That was an insta-kill. Yomite knew that Hu Tao was strong, but he only saw her weapon mastery and her vision, not her actual strength. What a monster, she just freaking punched it. He ought to be nicer to her, or he might just one day end up being strangled by her in sleep, unable to do anything. What a scary thought. Punching something to death wasn't hard, and Yomite had experienced it first class himself as brain matter splattered all over his face from the poor Hilichurl. But Hu Tao killed it without it even bleeding. From his understanding, she must have injured the brain of the wolf by causing it an internal bleeding, or she must have severed the connection to the brain. Not even a drop of blood was spilled, and the job was done. Something like that was impossible for him, as his brute and uncontrollable force didn't allow that. The unimaginable control of her strength almost frightened him. Shortly after the wolf had died, the black aura had dispersed, but Yomite had no time to notice this as he was dealing with the wolf himself. While he was admiring Hu Tao, aiming for this chance, the wolf in front of him bore its fangs and rushed again. He read the wolf's movement calmly, matching its movement. Doing so, he unsheathed the claymore on his back. They crossed each other in a flash. At that moment, the wolf's neck flew in the air and rolled vigorously on the ground. Killing an actual animal for the first time, some feeling of guilt and disgust floated in his mind. It wasn't as bad as when he thought about Hilichurls being humans, but animals were still a big part of his life, and he loved them. I am sorry, doggy. However, while he was immersed in the mourning, 4 new wolves appeared in a group. Of the mentioned 4, 2 of them moved in his direction. More of them came. Oh well, I will apologize later. He readied his claymore, and prepared himself to draw more blood. Just then, he heard a voice of a girl. Come forth, Oz, thy majestic beast of eternity. A streak of thunderous purple lightning had befallen the place, and what appeared to be a purple raven flew straight through the wolves, electrocuting them to death. Wolves were charred black, and it seemed that there was no longer any point in fighting. A woman, or rather, a blonde-haired young girl wearing bizarre, purple, web-like clothes, glanced at the 2 of them and smiled. I, Prinzessin der Veritilen, descend upon this land by the call of fate. She crossed her hands in front of her, placing one of her palms over her visible green eye, as the other one was covered with an eye patch. Standing in front of them, with this intimidating pose, Hu Tao didn't thank her for helping them, but instead was cautious, as she noticed that a purple vision was hanging around her waist. Yomite felt like he recognized the pose and murmured in his mind, Jojo? Hu Tao pointed her spear at the newcomer and asked, Who are you and why are you ruining our fun? Yomite turned to her and mouthed, How is that fun? Poor wolves. Me? He. Remember thou this, that I, Fiscal von Luftschloss Narfadork, am the Prinzessin der Veritilen, sovereign of Immernachtrich, omniscient and eminent judge of all the world's iniquity, divine being from another world and the devil of the Rhine. She let out a sneer. From another world? Yomite's interest was immediately piqued. Her familiar raven sighed and explained. She means that she's an investigator for the Adventurers Guild. Oh, it could talk. Yomite's hands were itching as he felt the need to pet it. Ahem. Oz. That is but one of my many royal engagements. She glanced their way and continued. And I shall bring great suffering to every worm that stands in my way. Okay? A little bit baffled, Yomite let out a single word. Chapter 35. A Chuyuni at Heart. Prinzessin der Veritilen puffed out her chest with enough pride to make up for its modesty. Hark, citizens! Rejoice as your savior, your Engel der Erlosung, has beseeched your calls and has come to rid the curses that ail your lands. She pointed her noble finger at the Yomite, the guy who was rightfully minding his own business and only wanted to move on and finish his last daily quest. You there! Thou shalt have the favor of servicing me first in my devoir. Speak to me the location of my adversaries, for time is of the essence. Mine audience is required post-haste. Raven wings flapped monotonously. Oz wasted no time, no beat, in translating. She wishes to ask if you could point us in the direction of a nearby Hilichurl camps, dear sir. Oh, the Hilichurls? Yomite answered, as if talking with a bird was as normal as breathing. Well, he knew a certain flying fairy, so he guessed that talking animals were pretty normal. Are you adventurers as well? He wanted to pet the raven, immediately. Oz nodded. Yes, basically. From her introduction it doesn't seem like she means any harm, as she works for the guild, so there is no point in starting any conflict. She just helped us out anyway. Our objective is the same, so we might as well just join them. Well, to tell you the truth, we are doing our daily quests and were sent here to exterminate a Hilichurl camp, but from what we were told, there is a lot of them here on the hills, so why not go together? Yomite proposed, definitely not hiding an intention to pet the animal in front of him. Thank you, that would be GRE. Oz, Fiscal reprimanded, taking offense at her familiar's actions. She held out a pouch of coins for the him. Have you forgotten your manners? This man has served his prinzessin well with valuable information and a request that is good enough for someone as grandiose as me. It is only natural that he be rewarded greatly for his endeavors. Can Raven shriek? Maybe squawk would be a more appropriate term, but it sounded more like a shriek to Yomite. Poor bird. But, mein Fräulein, I must strongly advise you against spending any more of your mora. The bounty we gathered from those Mitatrolls is slowly running out. We cannot carelessly give away any more, and besides the man has proposed to work together, there is no need to reward him, as two parties will only equally benefit from each other. Think, mein Fräulein, think. Hush now. Fiscal lifted her hand. 'Tis but a trite sum, enough to bring him succor in his time of need. What kind of majestic, gracious ruler will I be if I let such a worthy man starve without so much as a loaf of bread to feed himself? Oz, kindly remind us why I, the Prinzessin der Vertilum, had embarked on a journey and turned into the most famous adventurer everyone is talking about in the first place. Because we're broke? Don't be absurd. We came here just as fates decreed us to. To share with these kind folk mine altruism true. Do you not hear it? The twisting of the knots on the lyre of destiny, the chorus of echoes as was prophesied by the ancient historians of Maine Imernactrich. And for where there is valor, there are riches, so they say in this place. Before she could utter the last syllable, a blush crept up her cheeks. And besides, my spending habits aren't that bad. So, Oz said, rolling the words. We're almost broke. Foolish, her familiar was. Of course, the answer would be, yes. A princess with no mora to her name? She would rather feed her head to a Mitatrol than admit the fact that maybe, just maybe, she hadn't been responsible with her budget that much and has been rewarding people left and right. But that was only natural for a king, or rather the Prinzessin der Vertilung had to reward her subjects individually for their feats, as kingdom would be nothing without its citizens, right? Fiscal hung her head and sighed. Seriously, Oz. Your mouth has been running a lot more lately. For a moment, Yomite saw the Chuyuni facade on her face crumble. No, wait. I don't really need money, honestly. I have a lot. Just keep it. He was seriously starting to feel sorry after witnessing their small confrontation. Hu Tao, on the other hand, just tilted her head and asked, Assistant Kun? What language is she speaking? I don't understand every second word. She basically said that she will join us for a while to hunt Hilichurls, if you don't mind. Hearing that, Hu Tao lowered her spear and nodded. Oh, so that was the case, alrighty then. Fiscal turned her head toward him and stared at him for a while before speaking. Bold of you to request such a thing to the Prinzessin der Vertilum, but the so-called grouping up of the mortal wretches might not be so bad once in a while. We shall embark together to hunt our adversaries. Yomite has met quite a few of the so-called Chuyuni people. Be it as a teenager or even as an adult when he worked with authors, some of them had this cringe Chuyuni spunk to them, so he got used to dealing with these weird beings. Well, it was true that pretty much everyone has had that one phase when they were younger, the 8th grader syndrome, if you will. He was a bit ashamed to admit it, but he was also a bit Chuyuni when he was younger. However, that was all in the past. It existed everywhere. Teenagers with self-important fantasies, knowing-it-all nerds, and kids that feel super special. There was a higher tendency for escapism due to society imposing enormously high pressure to be competitive and conformist, even on young children all around the world. This caused them to escape into their delusional worlds where they found happiness, and could relax without having to care about their parents' expectations. So things like Chernibia syndrome were actually real. However, the girl in front of him seemed like a special case. From what he had seen so far, This so-called prinzessin had actual power to back up her delusions. Chapter 36, First Impression? Together, the party of 4, including the majestic raven, had progressed through the forest. The air grew colder, which was a good sign, as the raven pecked at the dead autumn leaves that the wind did not whip away. Not long after, he flew down from the tree and settled on Fiskel's shoulder. Mein Fräulein, I have spotted a large encampment of 13 hilichurls on a nearby hill together with one mitochurl resting nearby. Shall we deal with them? As expected from my loyal familiar, the beast of immortality. We shall head out immediately. Yomite and Hu Tao nodded, and as they were walking, Yomite was silently thinking about his overall party. He had a strong pyro vision user, an ice guy character with special unknown abilities together with a cute fairy, and there was, of course, him. Now, his party needed at least 4 people for the full bonus of the Mora reward thingy. Paimon didn't count for a member apparently, as she didn't meet the requirements for the height from what he had asked Catherine like 20 minutes ago. Which was unfortunate, so he had to find someone else to fill in the void. He was thinking of Kia for a bit, but then he remembered how irresponsible he was and that he might make himself a cup of coffee in the middle of a hard fight, and then just casually watch them suffer while he would laugh away at their tears. Logically thinking, the best course of action would be to get a healer into their party, but so far, he hadn't seen a single healer apart from that deaconess from Mondstadt. Barbara was her name. But he kinda doubted that she would join his party out of nowhere. It made no sense for her to join some beginners. He glanced at the Chuyuni girl in front of him, and then at her raven. She has an electro vision, and a bow for easy long-distance picks. Her raven can fly and is perfect for scouting out the area ahead. If he could somehow get her to join them, that wouldn't be half bad either. She wasn't a healer, but long-distance attacks coupled with scouting could be very deadly, and she would most definitely be useful to him. Of course, they already had Paimon for scouting out ahead, at least that was his plan initially, but then he noticed she was too slow. He perceived it when she was chasing after Hu Tao. She was flying but could barely keep up with her. The raven in front of him had no problem flying at a speed that was at least 5 times that of Paimon. He also doubted Paimon could fly too high into the air, as from what he had observed, she only flew around the eye level of Lumen, so it must have been taxing for her to fly higher than that. That's why he was seriously considering Fiskel. She mentioned the need for money, and from what the raven talked about, they were usually traveling alone, most likely because no one could stand her Chuyuni tendencies, but that didn't bother him in the slightest. As long as she performed well, he would accept her into the party without a problem. Money won't be a problem with the Mora party member bonus from the guild, and she will even get to talk to people at the same time. That could work. Now, I need to leave an impression on her somehow so that she would be willing to join. I have an idea, but it's really embarrassing. As he was thinking that, Hu Tao suddenly spoke. Fiskel, was it? I allow thou to state thus desire. The chosen child of God. Go on. She ran her hand through her blonde hair, resting it at her temple. What do you mean by that? Also, why do you speak like that? Hu Tao was confused. This was first time Hu Tao had met someone with such weird speaking pattern other than hilichurls, and she didn't really care enough to try and figure out what she meant by her words, so she asked her instead. Fiskel, on the other hand, was elated once more. It only brought her joy when other people had trouble deciphering the numerous riddles and puzzles within her sentences. Fiskel gestured towards her familiar raven Oz with her hand and allowed him to speak. Go on, Oz. She means that you. Oz had begun explaining what she wanted to say but was interrupted by Yomite, who was a tad bit faster. She means that you are a chosen person for having a vision, just like her, and that you should state what you wanted to say. As expected of Assistant Quinn. Then my question was, why does she speak like that? Is it popular around these parts? I've never heard words like Veriteling before. HMPF, I applaud thou to figure out a part of Prinzessin der Veriteling's abyss of the night language. She turned to Hu Tao and continued. Thou couldn't have heard, as the language of gods of Olympus is only known to me, and the stars of the firmament are naught but rifts. Hu Tao was lost once again and looked at Yomite for help. She probably meant that only she talks like that. Very well done, dear sir. It seems like you are well versed with Mein Fräulein's speaking pattern, and you've only just met. As mentioned before, my name is Oz and Mein Fräulein is Fiskel. Oz sat down on Yomite's shoulder, making him initiate the petting mode. As he was rubbing Oz's small head, Yomite pointed at Hu Tao and spoke. This is Hu Tao. She is the 77th director of the Wanxing Funeral Parlor in the Yue. Hu Tao nodded at her introduction, satisfied that he had remembered every detail about her profession. But then, Yomite did something unexpected. He made a pose, imitating the one Fiscal did, not too long ago, when she met them with one hand placed over his eye and said, "My name is Yomite Hizsha, a traveler, a challenger of universe and fate alike." He said that with a rigid voice as his cheeks turned a bit red. When was the last time he did this? 13 years ago? Role-playing was hard and embarrassing. He didn't want to do this, but it seemed like this would be the best chance he would get to make a good first impression on her to make her join. What were those few seconds of embarrassment compared to profit in the future? Kill me. Assistant Kun? Does your eye hurt? Or do you have a fever perhaps? Hu Tao wondered as she put her hand on his forehead. He ignored Hu Tao's stupid comment, although he had to admit that the cold rings on her fingers felt quite comfortable when she rested them on his forehead. Chapter 37 Mitachurl. He gazed at Fiscal, whose mouth was half open, unknown if it was from shock or something else. Did I fuck up? Is she gonna think I am making fun of her? He started panicking as she wasn't saying anything. Perfection. Oz muttered. You and Main Fräulein would honestly make a pair made in heaven. Without warning, the twin-tailed girl held the bird's beak, shutting it up, and surprising the pair. Oh, do mine ears deceive me? Or didst thou properly return thus greeting in earnest supplication just now? Yomite, was it? Grandiose. She nodded as she started clapping. Great, it looks like it went well. He thought, and his eyebrows started twitching as he gazed at the poor suffocating bird in Fiscal's grip. To be honest, he was tempted to say that he was an otherworldly traveler or something along those lines, but he didn't want to blow his cover. He wouldn't tell just anyone that he was from another world, but in this case it would have actually served well as a great cover and would have had a purpose. Fiscal would be a great addition to his party, and eventually he might end up telling his party members about it anyway. As for Lumen, she already figured it out herself, and Paimon was probably still in the dark, which was good. It didn't look like Hu Tao had heard or even understood what he had just said, and Fiscal was a Chuyuni, so she was bound to believe anything that sounded cool even if it wasn't the truth. Now that he thought about it, if Fiscal told someone about it, no one would believe her, as she was probably speaking crazy things all the time. And as for Hu Tao, well, even if she was to figure out the truth about him, she mentioned that people in Liyue were ignoring her, so these two girls were basically the best keepers of secrets in the whole world if it ever came down to it. Oh, it smells like a storm is coming, Oz said, finally escaping its master's chokehold, staring toward the darkened sky. The raven flapped its wings and took off into the sky, once again, doing its job of scouting the surrounding area to protect his Fräulein and her newly obtained party of friends. A part of him also wanted to show off a few of his abilities to them. He was thinking that his Fräulein has influenced him quite a lot. The trees were dense here, but also more open, allowing for more sunlight, and with the party going at a quicker pace, they were able to cover the distance very quickly. As they reached the center of the clearing, they were able to see their destination ahead of them. To the northeast of the clearing, a wooden hut with a few holes in it could be seen with its roof covered in vines. The clearing was very large, and there was uncertainty about what the area had once been used for. Other than the wooden hut, there were ruins of some sort, but they were just the rudimentary remains of some variety of village or settlement. While the party of four did not go closer, they did notice the presence of nearby hilichurls. It seemed to be the hilichurl camp that has notified them about not too long ago. The group didn't see the point in waiting and straight up ran into their territory, ambushing them and starting carnage. Hu Tao swung her polearm, cutting off legs of 3 nearby hilichurls. Fiscal released an arrow, and another one. Just in a matter of seconds, each arrow brought down a hilichurl archer or a hilichurl warrior, skillfully and precisely striking through their heart by the tip of her arrow. Yomite cut a few hilichurls in half himself, but silently gazed at her out of the corner of his eyes as he did so. He was right. Her bow mastery was insane. He definitely needed her in the party now, more than ever. Releasing so many arrows in succession with such precision was physically impossible. If anyone recorded this and showed it to someone from his old world, they would think it was a sped-up clip of a robot shooting on a target practice. Just then, something bigger showed up. It wasn't a regular hilichurl, although similarly to them, it had a mask and a weapon, albeit the axe in its hands was about as big as an average human being. Mitachurl! Hu Tao exclaimed and went to fight him, but was stopped by Yomite, who wanted to see Fiscal fight it. Lowly creature of the abyss. Taste the wrath of the Solomon. Unlike before, he could tell that Fiscal was serious this time, pouring her vision power into the arrow. After it was ready, she released the arrow, filled with purple lightning, across the overcast sky, thundering through the air, and struck the creature in its furry black belly, making it drop its huge axe and howl in pain. Ugga! It was a direct hit, but the creature still moved. It made a strange noise and charged at her. She moved to the side, effectively dodging the attack, and aimed her bow at its charging head. Drakentoter der Jökite, she muttered. The arrow sped from the string with a roar and struck the creature's right eye, electrocuting it and forcing it to stop due to the pain. The arrow became embedded in the soft eye material. She drew another arrow, charging it once more, and drawing back the bowstring. Horizon der Morgendämmerung. The second arrow flew from the bow, striking and embedding into the other eye, and stopped there. For a split second, the creature stood still, before its head exploded into small fragments of brain matter, and its cracked mask fell on the ground, finally shattering. Then, a small streak of electricity settled onto the ground next to its corpse, glistening happily as if fulfilling its purpose. Holy shit! Yomite exclaimed, witnessing the brutal sight. The head of the Mitochurl was much bigger than that of a Hilichurl and contained bigger brain coupled with more disgusting fluids, meaning it was much more gruesome than anything Yomite had seen so far since coming to this world. Seeing that their leader has fallen, the other Hilichurls decided to escape, but Hu Tao was a tad bit faster, and cut them down before they could do anything. Save me! Once again, Yomite could clearly hear the voice of the dying Hilichurl, but he appeared to be the only one. Chapter 38. Birds of Feather flocked together. Everything about Fiscal's appearance seemed to be designed to demand attention. The bangs of her yellow long hair covered one side of her face, hiding the eye patch beneath. Her black and purple leotard accentuated her petite build and shapely hips, the coattails giving her an extra flair as she walked through the city streets. Her stockings were asymmetrical as well, one juicy thigh exposed for the world to see. This young girl was a natural beauty. Light skin and hourglass body. An outfit and posture that attracted the gaze of everyone around her, be it men or women. At least until she started talking. Fiscal had the voice of a young teen. While it was pleasant to listen to, the same couldn't be said about her tone that was laden with arrogant self-satisfaction. And that wasn't even mentioning her word usage. She had a vocabulary so weird and fascinating at the same time, that the adventurers themselves have made a so-called princessin dictionary they could use to roughly understand what she was saying, although it wasn't very effective as there were hundreds of thousands of words and phrases, and it would take a while to find what you were looking for. Fiscal was aware of this fact, but merely scoffed. Such trivial thing as a dictionary wouldn't be enough for them to fully comprehend or contain her cryptic language of gods. Besides, the real deal was born powerful and wise enough to understand what she meant by her words, just like the man she met not too long ago, and his ability to comprehend everything she said. She was indeed talking about Yomite, the one and only. She didn't know whether to be happy or frustrated about him. On the one hand, she was almost shining with happiness when she finally found someone who clearly understood what she was saying, but on the other hand, she was tad bit frustrated that her way of speaking was decoded by him in a matter of seconds. That shouldn't have been possible, unless... Fiscal silently gazed at the back of Yomite, who was currently walking in front of her with Hu Tao. Unless that gent is the kindred soul of stars. That would explain everything. A tragic being of another world from beyond the stars, just like I am. They were currently in front of the gates of Mondstadt after exterminating more than 6 Hilichurl camps around the Wolvendom. Yomite remembered that he had to collect something as a proof of subjugation, so he took their broken masks with him. Fiscal then told him he could even sell those for Mora, which was convenient. The moment Fiscal stepped into the town's marketplace in Mondstadt, she struck a pose right in front of the Adventurers Guild, sweeping her hand across the plaza like a king addressing his subjects. Or in this case, Princessin addressing her loyal followers. And as she did so, a cool breeze drifted through the town, making her blonde hair and dark clothes dance in the wind. Behold, lowly commoners, for I, the Princessin der Veritilum, successor to the grand and glorious lost kingdom of the Immernachtreich, have returned and humbly request to join this commoners' party. Such a shame that a sovereign of my stature must stoop to walking these lowly streets of Mond, yet that is my perilous fate. Beseech me then, Catherine. Oh, welcome Miss Fiscal. Catherine had a troubled look on her face. She slowly reached her hand towards a book that was neatly placed on a small shelf right next to her, and started breezing through it, trying to locate words. Immernack, something, could mean 23 things. Please wait for a bit. Is she being serious right now? Yomite frowned as he walked up towards the counter. She wishes to join our party, so could you write her name down as a new member? Also, we have completed the daily quests. Sure. Certainly. She was visibly relieved. Dealing with Fiscal was harder than expected. Aha! So you do understand. Then fate does indeed bring kindred spirits together. Grandiose! Fiscal gestured towards the sky. Birds of feather flock together. My days as an interpreter are over. Oz's voice sounded strangely happy, as if a huge weight was taken off of his non-existent shoulders. No, I just guessed. Yomite denied it quickly. Fiscal looked happier than before. After a moment of thinking, she gave a small smile and crossed her arms. Do not fret. A princess should always give praise where praise is due. Now let us converse some more. Do not be mistaken, these are to be the foundations of our new world. It was far easier than he expected. He didn't even have to try that hard. Apparently the reason she was joining his party was that she was interested in conversing with him, although he could clearly see that when they defeated a hilichurl, she would try to collect as much materials to sell as she could, so Mora might have also been the reason. Birds of feather flock together, my ass. I will have to talk with that Raven Oz about these illusions that weren't true in the slightest. It was only a momentary feeling of embarrassment that won't happen again. He just wanted to make sure he would take any chance he could to get another capable member aboard. Nothing more. No more role-playing. It pains me on physical, mental, and spiritual level. Still, Fiscal said she preferred going in alone and that she might not be available at all times. At least that was what he understood from her speech pattern. But she didn't mind joining a party. Apparently, she had joined multiple parties before, but it was spontaneous choice, and the other members didn't really reach out to her the next day and avoided her the best they could. That was also partially the reason she preferred being alone. Yomite concluded that she was being alienated by people, just like Hu Tao. Oz explained her whole situation to him during a bathroom break. That's kind of sad. He guessed that they probably couldn't handle her antics and got rid of her as soon as they could, as communication in a party was a must, and she was a huge demerit when it came to speaking. As Catherine reached out for documents, and an oddly shaped item behind her, Yomite noticed something weird at the back of her neck but chose to ignore it. Nah. There is no way that there is an actual keyhole there, right? My eyes are just playing tricks on me. It's probably a birthmark, or a tattoo. He refused to believe what he just saw. Catherine then placed a card and odd item which turned out to be a black pin in front of them while saying, "Please drop your blood on the card." Yomite pricked his finger with the pin as he was told, and so did Hu Tao. Although it was a bit hard for him to do so, and he had to press the finger much harder than expected for it to even bleed. When he touched the card with that bloodied finger, white characters slowly began to surface. Catherine then explained, "This is a Guild AR card. You are capable enough to become an adventurer now. They are given to the new adventurers the moment they complete their first daily mission successfully. Now the blood contract was formed, so if someone other than the original owner touches this card for 10 seconds, the magic device will turn the card gray. It is for counterfeit prevention. Also, if you happen to lose the card, report it to the guild immediately. Although it costs money, we will reissue a new one." Catherine took Yomite's card, and after a short while, the black card turned gray. When he touched the card once again, it instantly returned to black. That's amazing. Yomite wondered how it worked. It just takes your blood, and it's bound to you forever. Interesting. HMPF, basic mortal equipment, nothing special. Fiscal sneered. That finalized the registration. You are both officially AR0, which I hope will steadily increase in the future. I wish you luck. And as for you, Miss Fiscal, you are already AR28, but by joining a party, you will also be given a rank of their party, which is currently AR0. So you may unlock a new party reward perks as you go on adventures together. Of course, your previous rank won't be lost. She also handed all 3 of them dog tags, which would update their team adventurer rank automatically. Shiny! Hu Tao played with it in her hands. Yomite then asked for one more tag as there was still Lumen, but Catherine said that Lumen had to be present, and that she couldn't give away more tags than the current number of people present. Chapter 39, A Fated Meeting of Polar Opposites. Yomite had received a bountiful sum of 120k Mora and 60 Primo Gems for completing the daily quests from Catherine. As mentioned previously, the Adventurers Guild system was a bit weird. Well, at least Yomite found it really abusable. He was now currently in party with only Hu Tao, as Lumen wasn't here, so they only got double the bonus from 60k to 120k Mora. In the upcoming days, if Yomite had a full party of 4, and completed daily quests, he would earn 240k Mora each day, and almost 2 million Mora just within a week of the daily quests. And there were plenty of other quests on the quest board too, meaning he would get rich in no time. Then there was also the case of Lumen returning his money, but he didn't care about it that much. A great cheat character had entered his party, who would care about a few thousand Mora. Once he received his payment, he offered to share the Primo Gems with Hu Tao and Fiscal, but neither of them knew how they operated, so they both declined. Apparently, Fiscal had about 900 Primo Gems herself and was treasuring it if her Mora ran out by any chance. But of course, that didn't come from her mouth but from Oz. There was no way someone like her would admit it. There was a rumor around Mondstadt that powerful individuals from Liyue and Sneznaya were buying out as many Primo Gems as they could, but no one really knew how they worked or where they came from. All they knew was that you could use them to make your vision stronger, but the method wasn't known either. Only a few chosen found out about the method. Hey, why don't we go somewhere to eat to celebrate our first success as a party? Hu Tao suggested this when they left the guild. It was slightly still early for lunch, but they might as well just go. They decided to enter the Good Hunter in the town, as it was probably the only restaurant selling food besides the inn in this city. Once they've sat down, Yomite offered to pay lunch for all 3 of them, as he had received money from his dailies. Hu Tao cheered and Fiscal didn't look happy or mad about it, she just accepted the offer. He ordered himself a so-called fisherman's toast. Hu Tao had a golden chicken burger, while Fiscal had some light salad. So burger is a thing of this world as well. Interesting. As he looked at Fiscal eating a small piece of her salad, he mused that maybe she was ashamed to ask for something more. He ordered her and himself a hot sandwich and milk, as that fisherman's toast wasn't enough to satiate his hunger. Oz said that he didn't need to necessarily eat, but he still enjoyed the meat pie Yomite ordered for him, eating with gratitude. Well, from his appearance, it seemed like he was a raven, and since ravens were omnivorous, they would eat anything. Eating meat shouldn't pose a problem or endanger him in any way. Yomite was sitting on a chair outdoors and munching on his food with his party. His spot was pretty nice, and he could see all the way up to the entrance of Mondstadt, and naturally, the bridge. Oh, come to think of it, that kid, what was his name again? Timmy? Wasn't anywhere near the bridge when we passed by, but maybe he is still sleeping or something. Yomite was thinking of apologizing in Hu Tao's stead. Her behavior at the time was pretty bad, it was just a small kid after all. Once they were done eating, they entered the Resin Moon Inn. Yomite ignored the degenerate gaze of the female team behind the counter that seemed to be saying, he brought another woman with him, how lewd, and walked into his room. He had discussed this with Fiscal during their meal, and apparently she also lived in Mondstadt. Not just that, but her house was a few meters away from the Resin Moon Inn itself. That was great, at least Yomite could save up money by not moving into a bigger room. Once they've entered the room, they saw Lumen braiding Paimon's hair. She was smiling while doing so, and Paimon was also enjoying it. Yo! Yomite called out, catching their attention. Bad Tattoo returned. Did you bring any food? Paimon is starving! She flew from Lumen's hands and circled around Yomite's head. He handed her a small snack and she sat on the bed with gratitude. Party leader, welcome back. Lumen greeted him, but her attention was soon, however, preoccupied with the new mysterious girl who was standing next to him. Prinzessin der Veritilen greets you. Fiscal immediately struck her pose. First impression was crucial, and she always had to do her best to let everyone around her know what kind of grandiose person she was. Seeing Fiscal's weird pose, Lumen squinted her eyes. This is our new party member. We will be in a team starting tomorrow, Yomite joyfully replied. His goal of obtaining a full party for the Mora bonus was achieved. Why wouldn't he be happy? Fiscal sneered at his reaction. She could just feel the happiness he radiated, for him to finally find a soulmate, someone who could understand him. He must truly be glad she joined his party. If Yomite knew what she was thinking, he would heavily deny it. He hated role-playing. It was probably the only thing he was too embarrassed to do. He never understood those role-players on Discord. Their minds must have been too strong to resist such an amount of cringe. And just like that, Fiscal was heavily starting to misunderstand him and his intentions. But maybe that was for the better. She felt like she knew what he must have gone through as a child, just like she did. A long time ago in a place far, far away, there was a tiny little girl. The girl's parents were busy adventurers. She spent most of her childhood in the library, traversing the countless universes that were contained in the pages of the library books. She became the ruler of the Imernactrich, summoned thundering retribution as a royal princess, and formed a soul bond with the raven. HMPF. Thinking that everything I, Fiscal, Prinzessin der Veriteling say isn't real. How pathetic. Worry not, for we shall show them the end of Apocrypha together. She bore her gaze into Yomai, giving him a mental thumbs up. Her childhood was hard, so she could quickly sympathize with the fellow soul. Unable to fit in with her peers due to her obsession for fantasy novels, she often felt lonely and sad. She also remembered every word of her doubters. Even her parents told her to stop acting like a child at one point. Dear, you are already 14 years old. It's time to open your eyes and face reality. World isn't always a nice place, but we have to bear it. Her father told her with a frown of disapproval. She ran and ran away, crying until she arrived in the library, her own world, and isolated herself for a long time. All of that was in the past. Nothing of relevance. Right now it was the true her, Prinzessin der Veriteilung, a top-class investigator of the Adventurers Guild who happened to have an IQ much higher than most people, with a vocabulary so vast it could dwarf the entirety of the biggest mountain in Dragon's Pine if it were to be converted in sheer volume. And that was not including her being able to make work of any foe in 10 seconds flat with either the pointed end of her arrows or fried to a crisp by her trusty Oz. She was simply godly and divine. However, Chuyuni people tend to have multiple weaknesses. One of them being, I'm Lumen. People of a few words, such as Lumen. She could do it if she tried to, she could talk a lot, but she simply didn't want to. Lumen wasn't really in the mood to feel happy or enjoy something, as she was busy searching for her brother. This also led to a huge shift in her personality. An almost emotionless person of a few words, introduced herself with the dullest and the most uninterested voice Fiscal had ever heard, squaring off against the Chuyuni. Chapter 40. Let's pretend this didn't happen. Welcome to the party. An awkward moment of silence was broken by none other than Oz, who suddenly materialized himself in front of them. He sat on Fiscal's shoulder and spoke. As mentioned previously, this is Main Fräulein Fiscal, Prinzessin der Veriteilung, and you can just call me Oz. It's a pleasure to meet you all. He did a deep, elegant bow. Did that raven just speak? Paimon was so freaked out she almost dropped her snack. Yes, indeed, I have received this magnificent ability from none other than Main Fräulein. That's a bit weird. Paimon has never seen a speaking raven before. She finished stuffing her cheeks with the snack and flew around Oz in wonder, examining him by touching his wings. Ha! Nice to meet you too, my little fairy friend. I may be weird, though I am sure you must have seen phenomena far stranger than myself before, correct? Yeah, Paimon doesn't get it, but as long as you are not going to eat Paimon's food, you can stay. Yomite massaged his temples. Was there something else on her mind other than food? Lumen was silently staring at Oz. It seemed like she wanted to pet him as well. Yomite knew that feeling very well. It was hard to resist the cute animal. Hu Tao's legs were getting tired, so she laid down on her bed and pulled out a book of some sort, quietly reading it and waiting for the introductions to be over. Seeing that they were paying attention to her, Fiscal laughed. Intending to make her thoughts known to everyone in the room, she spread her arms. My loyal subjects, I see your faces are filled with fear, trepidation, and confusion at the vile and villainous evils that once again seek, albeit in vain, to disturb the peace and tranquility of the world beyond stars. The world of Mondstadt, but fear not, for I, Prinzessin der Veriteilung, the sovereign of the Imernactrich, omniscient and eminent judge of all the world's iniquity, is here to serve its subjects in needs. I, Fiscal, have roamed the galaxy and traversed countless worlds. I have learned the fate of 10,000 universes and have had revealed unto me the destiny of every living soul. I shall be joining this party and blessing it with my presence. I find the look in the eyes of people, no, heroes present here most agreeable. Dusk and dawn but fleeting shadows are. Once more, the twists of fate have led some capable individuals into my everlasting night. Hopefully, we won't need to part soon. Together with my Edelstein der Dunkelheit, a royal heirloom from der Imernactrich, a ceremonial ornament that displays the majesty of the Prinzessin der Vertilung before the unworthy. We will conquer this astral plane. Even here, in this fateful world, I have been reunited with my rightful inheritance as one of royal blood and noble spirit, for the majesty of a true princess shall draw her royal heirlooms unto her wherever so she may roam, and now it's time for it to contribute by joining in this party like a sacred virgin pact, worthy of the Prinzessin. My dear Oz had already introduced himself, but I feel like it lacked elegance, so I shall do that for him, once again, as the capable master and Prinzessin. Oz's full name is Osvaldo von Hrafnevines. Where I hail from, he holds dominion over stars and sky across 3 universes, and the souls of the mighty, fallen in battle, rest in the shadow of his wings. One should add that the penalty for mispronouncing his name is to have one's tongue torn from one's mouth. However, as I am a princess, and you are my loyal subjects who have my favor, we are at liberty to simply call him Oz. The stars of the firmament are naught but rifts thrust open by Oz's beak into the boundless tapestry of darkness. My left eye, the Aug der Vertilum, which sees the threads of stars and fate, will keep everyone from harm's way. And Oz, the raven that has witnessed the demise of countless worlds, will watch over everyone on our journey. Should this world, like a beast prowling in the night, covet our dreams, then I, Prinzessin der Vertilum, shall fell it with my ensorcelled arrows of judgment. For one such as myself, with no choice but to accept the singularity of the outcomes, having but one means of observation, I've concluded that this party is fated for greatness, and together, we shall rule above others and change the world for the better. Let's strip the world of delusions and falsehood. With this party, I may more fully manifest my majesty as Prinzessin der Vertilum, and defeat that sworn enemy of fate named reality, that has been plaguing the world beyond. The day of judgment is nigh. Prove it to me, seal this blood contract with me, enlist my assistance, and muster the will and courage to reach your destined future. Ah, worry not. Even at the last, when I bring the lightning of retribution upon this world, you shall come to no harm, for thou art blessed by the Prinzessin. Blast the reality, burst into shreds, banish this world. Together! Fiscal announced with a loud shout, with her blonde, golden-like hair swaying and her moderate chest puffing out for oxygen. After saying all of this in one breath, she let out a satisfied smile, watching over everyone in the room, successfully making everyone's jaw drop. Her goal of an elegant and brilliant introduction was now complete. Quickly darting her eyes across her audience, she took a good look at every person, every face, taking in their expressions of disbelief and confusion. Yet again, she achieved perfection. Yet again, she was fulfilled. Noticing that everyone was speechless, Yomite coughed loudly. Well, that was something. He barely let out some noise. So, now that we have the introductions out of the way, why don't we go and complete some quests together? The rewards will be pretty nice. Nobody was in a hurry to say anything, nobody was sure what to say. But they just nodded, agreeing to his suggestion almost automatically, still baffled about what just transpired a few seconds ago. Everyone tried to act like this didn't happen just now. Chapter 41, A Dendro Tentacle King? After the previous confrontation, the group moved out and arrived in front of the Adventurers Guild. There were various kinds of tasks in the guild, from monster subjugation, collection, investigation, and there were even unusual ones such as babysitting too. The reward for the babysitting one was surprisingly high, but Yomite didn't know how to act around children, so he immediately dismissed this one. They have completed several guild tasks today, so their guild rank went up from non-existent rank to AR0. They'd basically graduated from being beginners, and their team cards held rank 0 respectively. While their party was hella strong, they could still fail if they were careless, and if the quest was difficult, there would be some danger to their lives. They needed to brace themselves much more. But such was the life of an adventurer, full of danger and excitement. Kill the Dendro Tentacle King? Sounds pretty nice. Yomite read it out loud from an outlet that hung down the task board. The reward was 200k Mora, meaning they would get 800k from the bonus. It was a great quest. Hey, I think this one could be nice. Absolutely not. The girls refused in unison. Huh! All of them had disgusted expressions on their faces. Upon further interrogation, Yomite understood why they were so annoyed about it. As it turned out, the Dendro Tentacle King was currently in a faraway country called Sumeru, and it would take them months to get there by foot. But that wasn't the biggest problem they've had with this quest. Apparently, it was reported that numerous parties of adventurers fought it, and returned back buck naked while screaming. Be it guys or girls. The acid it produced was capable of removing clothes, yet it didn't harm the human skin in any way. This kind of acid was rare, and almost nothing in this world could produce something with a similar effect. The boss monster was completely harmless, and didn't have any lethal attacks. Other than spitting acid, it didn't even touch anyone and just laughed at the defeated parties loudly while having a degenerate smirk portrayed on its face. Their equipment and weapons fell apart during the battle, and seeing their naked companions, the parties were too embarrassed to continue, so they ran away, while cowering their private areas. The news of this reached every part of the world, raising its bounty from 20k to 200k mora. Even Lumen, who wasn't an inhabitant of this world for too long, knew about it and of course, disliked it. So in conclusion, the girls just couldn't stand being near sticky, slimy tentacles that could remove their clothes. Yeah, so even a cliché like this exists. Shame, shame. Yomite let out a sigh as he looked over the other quests. A new cryo-regis vine sprouted near the area of the Thousand Winds Temple. A cryo-regis vine? What's that? He read further, as he noticed the description at the end. A monster formed from a vine that was imbued with the essence of biting frost within the ley lines. Some studies suggested that plants are like the organs of the world, harmonizing the turbulent energies of the ley lines. Concrete examples of this were mist flowers and whopper flowers, and the like, which brim over with elemental energy. In certain circumstances, some plants will turn into creatures of monstrous size and intent, such as the cryo-regis vine did, in the course of many years. The next upcoming cryo-regis vine was estimated to sprout in a few years. However, it seemed that its growth sprout was sped up, and this cryo-regis vine went out of control. Now, Yomite had no idea what some of those words mentioned meant, but he was sure it was a huge dangerous monster flower that needed to be exterminated. The reward for defeating it was 300k mora, meaning he would be able to get 1 million in one swoop. I think that this one is fine. What do you guys say? He glanced around his companions, and they seemed okay with it. The danger was, after all, part of the adventure. There was even some thrill to it. How long will it take for us to get to that location? Yomite asked his party. At least 2 people here were good enough to remember the locations around Mondstadt. One of them would be Hu Tao, who had apparently traversed the entire world, which Yomite still didn't believe was true. The other one was Fiscal, who was supposedly an investigator of the Adventurers Guild or something like that. She must have gone on countless scouting missions to gather info. She would for sure know how long it took to get there, and where it even was. It would be as long as it would take thee to run away from thy destiny, Fiscal replied, and Oz chimed in. Main Fräulein said it's about 2 hours by foot. Yomite spread his hands in a gesture that was half helpless and half amused. As expected, even he had no idea how to translate this one. He had to thank Oz later. Fiscal had a small grin on her face. It seemed like this time, her words were encoded well enough. It was her win. Oz noticed his lady's triumphant smirk and continued. From what we know, it would take about 20 minutes with a carriage. However, after the attack of Storm Terror, all roads in the Mondstadt territory were closed down, and no one is willing to use carriages anymore. TCH. Storm Terror again, we really need to take care of it. Yomite sighed. There were simply too many problems regarding that dragon. That would not be wise. That chap could eat us and use me as the toothpick. Oz's post-traumatic stress disorder was acting up. He remembered the times his Fräulein ordered him to infiltrate the Storm Terror's lair, to gather information about the huge wind formation that was surrounding the lair, and the Storm Terror itself. He was lucky he wasn't discovered, or else he might have actually been turned into a sparkly toothpick. Storm Terror? Why, one never would have thought that a being that one might have kept as her pet could, in this world, be capable of causing such calamity. Pitiable are the incompetence of this world. Fiscal chuckled in amusement, merely flicking her blonde hair aside. Paimon doesn't get it. How is Storm Terror her pet? Paimon held her head in her small arms, seemingly trying to understand what Fiscal meant, but to no avail. Lumen also pondered about what Fiscal meant. If Storm Terror was her pet, then wouldn't that mean she was extremely powerful? Hu Tao was dozing off, as she could barely understand what was said. Alright, we are taking this quest then, Yomite announced, trying to bring some sense to the party. After hearing what he said, Hu Tao immediately jumped up and cheerily ripped the request notice down from the board, taking it over to the receptionist. When she came back, she told them that Catherine wished them good luck on their adventure. Chapter 42, Godwin. Oz was dismissed and returned to Fiscal's vision to preserve her vision power. Unlike Paimon, who could come and disappear whenever she wanted to, Oz could only materialize if certain requirements were met, and for a shorter period of time. The party left Mondstadt and went to the specified location. After walking down the road, while chatting the boredom away, the group saw a man in armor, nervously stealing a few glances their way. Yomite noticed the camp that was set in an open meadow near the man. Broad, high grass-covered lush, green fields of tall, bright green grass with colorful, vivid flowers dotting its surface. A kettle of some sort and a tent were resting near his fidgeting figure. The man had obviously been here for a while. From the way he was dressed, he looked like he was a knight of Favonius. Why would a knight of Favonius be outside of the gates of Mondstadt? Is he a scout on a mission? Either way, it didn't matter to him. His teammates didn't seem to care about him, so neither did he. As they passed by him, the man finally reached out his hand towards them and choked out a few simple words. "I know you see me. Please don't ignore me. Alright, what is it that you want?" Yomite reluctantly turned back. He could feel that that man would be nothing but trouble. The knight let out a sigh of relief and patted his plated chest. "Thank the Archons you stopped by. My name is Godwin. I am from the elite squadron of the Knights of Favonius. I am currently 22 years old and have a wonderful girlfriend waiting for me back home. We love each other very much. That's why I was so reluctant to join the Knights of Favonius, as I knew I would have to go on expeditions, leaving her behind. We've been together with Glory ever since we were little, but an accident struck and her eyes were damaged. She can no longer see anything other than silhouettes. But I won't give up. I will find a cure for her to save her one day. I will take care of her. Anyway, I need your help in delivering this letter. The thing is, I can't personally enter the city of Mondstadt anymore, but I see that you must be a powerful group of adventurers to have 3 visions in your party, so if you have time, please deliver this message to my girlfriend, Glory. I will pay you 1,000 mora." Yomite's eyebrow was jumping up and down, and a small vein almost popped on his forehead. "Ha! Is this the so-called random world quest? Are you kidding me with this paragraph-like backstory? Not even a pretty girl asking for assistance, but a dude in knight's armor. You might as well start talking about your 8 generations of your family members first." He turned around, intending to leave. No, please. Wait for a bit. What is it?" Yomite turned back once more, and looking over the knight's flustered face, he decided to listen to him. He wasn't a bad guy after all. "As I was saying, wait, where did I end up? Anyway, I get along with Glory really well despite her being blind. I swear I will. You are." He was interrupted by Yomite, putting his hands on his shoulders, shaking them violently. "No more backstory, okay? You talk too much. If you don't summarize what you wanted to say in one short, simple sentence, then we will leave. Just tell me the crucial points. 10 words, no more. Why can't you go to Mondstadt yourself to deliver it?" "Oh, okay, well. Shortly, I am a knight directly under the command of Grand Master Varka, and we went on an expedition. But I lost the keepsake my lover, Glory, gave me, so I went back to look for it. But in the meantime, I got lost and Grand Master Varka already left without me. Now I am ashamed to return back. So please, bring this letter to Glory. She has been all alone for the past 2 months." The man was on the verge of tears, massaging his shoulders from the intense pain caused by Yomite's tiger-like grip. Hearing this, Yomite let the thoughts in his subconsciousness settle, and there, he found the profound sentence. "You are a fucking idiot. What are you ashamed of? Just go back. Your lover is literally waiting for you alone. Idiot, idiot." Hu Tao stuck out her tongue. Dummkopf indeed. Fiscal also concluded that the man didn't deserve what he had. "Paimon is irritated. This man is a dummy." Paimon stomped her little boots in the air, her fists quivering. His situation really reminded Yomite of Kia, who also fell asleep and forgot that he was supposed to be going somewhere. For having a god in his name, he sure doesn't win. "Ah, come on. Now I am saying these stupid dry jokes too, thanks a bunch, Hu Tao." Showered by insults, the knight cringed each time he heard someone from Yomite's party speak. Just as he was about to run away, he heard the voice of his savior. "We will deliver." It wasn't an uplifting voice, either was it a voice you could rely on, but nonetheless, at this point, it was nice to hear something. It was Lumen who spoke. "You must love her a lot, afraid to hurt her." Godwin began nodding. He grabbed her hands in his and shook them up and down. Why, yes, of course. I am glad you understand. I am just ashamed to go back since all this time I was supposed to be traversing the world and sending her messages about how beautiful it is, and yet I am an utter failure and can't go back like this. Yomite glanced at Lumen, who had an unwavering expression on her face. She must be thinking about her own family. Well, it's not like I would just leave without helping this man either. I just wanted to punch some sense into him. Lumen grabbed the letter from Godwin's hands and promised not to open it until they returned. Before they left, he had one more small request. As Glory was blind, she couldn't really read the letter, so he asked her or someone from the party to read it for her. Lumen once again agreed without hesitation, and the party left for their quest. Chapter 43, Reckless Pal Lad. Oh! Look, Paimon can barely see Mondstadt now. An excited and high-pitched voice could be heard near the Thousand Wind Temple. Surely, such an ecstatic tone could be heard even from the top of the Celestia. Yes, the view is beautiful from up here. Lumen, who was already used to her companion's joyful attitude, agreed with her. Paimon was something she really needed in her life currently. She was truly glad she fished her out of that pond. Hu Tao opened her mouth wide and started making weird sounds as the wind breezed against her mouth. Goro, 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 Goro! She raised her arms upward as the wind crashed into her. The front of her black coat was lifted up, as a result, revealing her stomach and underboobs to the world. Fiscal was the first to notice this, and immediately pulled her coat down. Thank you. Hu Tao appreciated it, and soon enough spotted a pair of crystal flies flying around, catching her attention. Shiny! She started running after them in an attempt to collect their gems. Such violent wind, tormenting my companion. Of course, I shall help, but... Fiscal glanced at Yomite, who was currently standing in one spot, looking around absent-minded. Your BB breasts were almost seeing. A young overlord of the deathly realms such as yourself ought to be careful around people. What if my kindred soul Yomite saw you? Fiscal folded her arms, seemingly scolding her. That's fine, Assistant Kuan said my body is that of a child, so he wouldn't care either way. She replied with a somewhat grumpy voice. Is that so? Fiscal certainly didn't expect this kind of answer. Still, be careful, oh, divine child of God. Bad tattoo, do we have anything to eat? Paimon is starving. Paimon shot Yomite a pleading look, but he was busy looking around, trying to locate the entrance where the boss fight would take place. We will eat once we defeat the Cryo Regis Vine. With our party composition, it should be a piece of cake. Eating right before a fight isn't a good idea. You shouldn't fill up your stomach, it will slow your blood flow, dulling your movements. Well, in your case though, you aren't really useful in battle. Humph. Paimon will let you know. Paimon's useful. Paimon has many special abilities. Special abilities? Something like being edible and tasty? Ah, geez. You are annoying Paimon on purpose, is that it? For the last time, Paimon's not emergency food. As if fed up with him, the pixie disappeared as she usually does, nowhere to be seen, leaving sparkly dust behind. Party leader, bully. Lumen mumbled. Frankly, true. He didn't deny it. I can't really help myself when it comes to teasing her. It's just so funny to see her get angry. It heals my soul. Lumen understood what he meant. Out of all the worlds Lumen had traversed, Paimon was probably one of the cutest, if not the cutest thing she had ever seen. Honestly, she was the reason Lumen hadn't lost all hope in the search of her brother, before joining Yomite's party. Fiscal interrupted the two of them, saying, I just received a divine revelation, as expected of myself, who has infinite knowledge and the greatest capabilities of comprehension. As a token of the Prinzessin der Vertilum, I, Fiscal, hereby declare that you all are worthy of receiving titles from me. The party looked at Fiscal in wonder as she continued. Yomite, the kindred soul of a star slayer. Lumen, the mute Prinzessin of fate. Hu Tao, the demon king of salvation. Paimon, the Paimon, the strange face-shaped emergency sustenance. Together with me, Prinzessin der Vertilum, we form the perfect team. Oz materialized into a small ball instead of his usual raven form as he flew above her shoulders and spoke. Main Fräulein meant to say that she is giving you guys nicknames because she likes why. Oz. Fiscal shouted and forced him to dissipate, making the group laugh. Everyone was in high spirits. It was a good thing for morale to be high during dangerous quests. Small interactions like this make you forget the feeling of fear, butterflies in your stomach, and many other negative feelings. As the party moved along the path, they met someone who was being attacked by slimes. They quickly rescued him and found out his name was Reckless Pal, a veteran adventurer. Yomite found it funny for someone to actually be called Reckless but didn't say it out loud. Palad's parents seemed to have foreseen the future to name their child like that. Just from the way Palad was fidgeting, he could tell that Palad wasn't very strong, but it seemed like he was indeed an adventurer from his outfit. After a brief period of talking, Palad handed them some more as payment for saving him, coupled with some steaks he cooked, and left for Mondstadt. A little while later, a cave of some sort was hidden in a wooded area. Like many places in the woods, it was located next to a stream. The stream was pretty much dry, and there was a point from which it seemed to lose its way, almost as if it were the starting line for a race. It was unknown whether it was dry because of drought or if the source was frozen from the cryo-regis vine, but that didn't matter now. It's here. Yomite pointed towards the hidden entrance with his finger, indicating for his team to enter. He tore through the vines covering the entrance with his claymore and cleared it out pretty quickly. The cave was rather narrow, but after making their way inside, they saw that it was much larger and wider than they originally anticipated. All around the wall, there were small holes providing ventilation for the cave. Chills went down their spine owing to the freezing cold permeating inside. Chapter 44, Cryo-Regis Vine Part 1. This doesn't seem like a normal cave. It's way colder than it should be. Yomite murmured as he tried to warm himself up with his martial arts robe, leading his party deeper into the cave. Well, at least now we know it's definitely the cave we are searching for. The Cryo-Regis Vine, as its name suggests, should be of cryo element. He pointed out. Yeah, cold. Lumen affirmed, rubbing her hands in the hope to make them at least a bit warmer. Yomite's body didn't seem to be immune or particularly resistant to cold, but asking for any more benefits or any other superpowers would be quite petty of him. He had already gotten so many gifts and power-ups from Sia that he had no right to complain about stuff like cold. Assistant Kun, if you come closer, I can warm you up. Hu Tao spread her arms open, grinning. After all, my vision is pyro. A hug will bring your temperature back to normal, and maybe even higher than that. No thanks. I could end up burned. My clothes were already in danger earlier today. No point in risking my life too. Sorry, maybe later, he replied, feeling rather annoyed remembering her stunt from this morning. Seriously, one needed extreme precision to use pyro element without it burning anything in its path. Warming stuff up without turning it to a crisp was hard enough, and yet she had the audacity to do it while performing handstands. She was simply crazy. TCH, you are no fun, Hu Tao pouted, looking away. The moment she did, she was met with a pleading gaze of Lumen, who extended her hands toward her way, in hopes to warm herself up in her fiery vision aura. Hu Tao chuckled and helped her with what she wanted, earning herself a gaze of gratitude from Lumen and a nod of approval from Yomite, who seemed relieved that she extended a helping hand to others in his party. Knowing her now, her weird personality made him a bit afraid of what to expect once more people joined them on their adventures. But so far everything was alright, and surprisingly, she seemed companionate enough. He also noticed that Fiscal was fidgeting and was probably having a much harder time than Lumen, as she only had a single stocking on her legs and the rest of her clothes were a simple dress, not designed for cold places, but warm and sunny outside world. Her dress consisted of multiple small holes for ventilation, which didn't quite help in this situation. Her pride, however, or made-up persona rather, made it impossible for her to approach anyone, nor to ask for help from others. Hu Tao locked gaze with Yomite, and he signaled towards Fiscal with his eyes. She followed his eyes and quickly understood. She grasped Fiscal's hands and started warming Fiscal up as well. What is thou doing? Warming you up? Seeing her innocent grin, Fiscal shyly murmured. Is that so? Then I shall allow thou to do as thou wish. It seemed like Fiscal was finally at her limit of withstanding the cold, and accepted her help. This area truly wasn't to her liking, but as the proud princessin, she had to endure the everlasting cold of eternal night, even if it meant stepping into the hell of ice. Yomite had to admit Hu Tao was a really good addition to his party after ignoring all the demerits she possessed. After a short while, they arrived in the center of the cave. A huge ice flower monster stood in the middle of it. It was indeed the Cryo-Regis Vine, and its shape was monstrous. The flower was currently facing the ground, but the group could clearly see it was moving, or at least, its vines were moving. So it was obviously alive, most likely resting at the moment, or forcing itself into cryo sleep to gain more strength. The creature didn't appear to move from its original spot though, as if rooted in there. Its cold aura filled the cave and froze everything from the ceiling to the ground. Yomite took out the quest paper and read the rest of the instructions for his party. The Cryo Regis Vine is a giant Regis Vine of absolute zero temperature, sure to freeze any unwary traveler to pure ice for ages. Weak points are a jewel at the base of its stem and the eye in the middle of its leaves. If struck carefully, the monster flower will fall down, deactivating its frozen shield that's enveloping its body, making it easier for you to slay. Use Pyro User for effective damage. That should be pretty easy to deal with. Let's do this then. The party nodded, and upon his command, entered its lair. When they were only a few feet away from the Cryo Regis Vine, it unfurled from its resting position and stood up outright, blooming with crystal sapphire light that began scanning the surrounding area. It moved its vines abruptly the moment it spotted something move. Giant ice lasers shot from the Cryo Regis Vine's eye while its two vine-like hands held a machine gun of frozen bullets, ready to freeze the intruders for all eternity to feel its pain. Alright, let me have a try first. Yomite rushed forward and slashed at the weak spot of the monster within its stem. Unfortunately, he was rebounded back with an equal force and barely stabilized himself on his feet next to his party. The so-called weak spot wasn't in any way weak. It felt as if he hit a huge metallic door. That core was probably the toughest thing Yomite had encountered since coming to this world, right next to the scales of the Stormterror dragon. It made him baffled that a core of ice could be this hard to penetrate. He would say his strength was insufficient, but in this case, he could feel that his claymore wasn't good enough to cut through it. He had to get himself a stronger weapon or else it might break apart with his strength and recklessness later on down the road. It's hella tough, he commented and took a deep breath. He wanted to test its durability, and indeed, it was high. I might have to use that technique again, but there is too many people around me. Tough. Lumen nodded as she cut off the incoming vines with her one-handed sword. Grasping the wind's might, she then formed a vortex of vacuum in her palm, scattering away the icy projectiles flying towards her. Oz! Reveal thyself. Fiscal summoned Oz and provided support fire whenever the Cryo Regis Vine was about to shoot icy bullets. The Cryo Regis Vine was interrupted and confused, frantically switching between moving targets. It was weak against multiple opponents as it only had one eyeball that was watching over one part of the battlefield. But that didn't necessarily mean it was weak. Its body stood firmly in the middle of the arena, further proving Yomite's hypothesis about it being rooted. Chapter 45, Cryo Regis Vine Part 2. Fiscal kept on shooting arrows precisely at that one eyeball of the Cryo Regis Vine, but it didn't seem to do any damage whatsoever. It seemed like before the arrows were able to reach its retina, they froze up and fell apart onto the boss arena. As Lumen dashed forward to slash at its core, the Cryo Regis Vine reached over to slam its head down, quickly sweeping the outer ring of the arena. Lumen evaded nimbly and lightly, but was forced out of the arena to avoid getting hurt. As the Raven sent a bolt of purple lightning at the monster, successfully staggering it, and Yomite and Hu Tao took this as a free opening to engage. However, the Cryo Regis Vine had quickly recovered, flinging two ice beams into an overlapping cross pattern, freezing the ground solid. Both of them dodged this attack by dashing to the side. This monster is dangerous. It could literally freeze you to death in a matter of seconds. I can't afford to get hit even once or I am done for. Yomite thought as he observed the frozen tiles on the ground. The Cryo Regis Vine shot out icicles that followed two of them for a few seconds before losing their homing attribute and helplessly falling on the arena tiles. It seemed that the Cryo Regis Vine wasn't strong enough yet to control projectiles relatively far from its body for a longer period of time. Seeing that its attack had failed, it raised its body and lashed upwards, and a yellow eerie-like glow traveled up its stem, following which it repeatedly slammed its head on the ground. Blue crystals dyed the floor and ice within its path. Everyone, spread out, dodge to the side! To the side! Yomite shouted and sidestepped the ground spikes of ice following him by a hair's breadth. Everyone did the same and returned to safety outside of the arena, leaving Yomite as the only one standing in front of the monstrous flower. The Cryo Regis Vine leaned its head forward towards Yomite with its buds spread, and after locking onto his location, it fired a beam of cryo from its corolla for a few seconds, forcing him to dodge yet another onslaught of cryo spikes coming his way. After firing the beam at the spot it locked onto, The Regis vine proceeded to slowly turn around 360 degrees, sweeping the beam along. But luckily, no one was caught in it. Hu Tao! Destroy its shield! Okie dokie! She ran forward with her polearm raised up and activated her vision. She thrusted her polearm that was lit on fire forward and easily slashed through the icy core as if she was spreading butter, destroying its weak spot and making its huge frame successfully furl itself up and lay on the ground, unmoving. Pyro was truly the most effective element against cryo enemies, and Hu Tao was once again proving to be very useful. Nice job! Now hit it with everything you've got! Yomite shouted, and the group closed in on the flower, unleashing hell upon the defenseless enemy, slowly cutting away its parts one by one. Lumen unleashed a tornado, and on the way, it latched onto the fire element of Hu Tao and turned into a fire whirl, which melted the flower instantly. And finally, Yomite cut the flower in half, but the claymore in his hands had shattered, leaving him with no weapon to use. All of it wouldn't be possible without a pyro element. The fight would be dragging on forever, but thanks to Hu Tao, who easily took care of its core, they finished it within a few minutes. Great, it appears I need to buy a new two-handed sword. I need something stronger this time though. The Cryo Regis vine was finally defeated, and a few items appeared next to it on the ground. Did this just appear out of thin air, or did the Cryo Regis vine have this in its possession? He picked up the items from the ground and observed them. The first thing was an aqua gem. Although it was cracked and pretty much unusable, he knew it must have been expensive, so he decided to keep it to maybe look for a way to restore it. He looked at the backside of the gem, and found out there was some kind of hidden message inscribed in it. Sorry. My bitter cold burn away world. The letters were in an unrecognizable state, but there was indeed a message of some sort hidden within the gem. Interesting, whatever this might be. He picked up another thing that looked like some sort of armor, and put it over himself. Oh, Assistant Kun has gotten himself an artifact. Not fair! Hu Tao exclaimed, leading everyone's gaze upon him. Artifact? What's that? Yomite questioned. He knew what artifacts were from other novels he used to read, but in this world, they might be something different. That's primarily the reason why he asked. Artifacts are artifacts. Rare equipment gotten from monsters. From the way yours looks like, I would say it's pretty high grade. Hu Tao explained. So is it like a magical item? Giving me some kind of buff? He questioned, confirming it was like in other novels. Just a bunch of special equipment to use if absolutely necessary during a life-threatening crisis. I am not sure what you mean by buff, but artifacts make you stronger, be it in defense or attack. I myself have an artifact. She pointed to her hat and continued. As I've talked to you about it before, this hat is capable of many things. It was left by my grandpa. I see. I think I understand now. The last thing Yomite picked up from the ground was a hard frost core of the Cryo Regis vine. Yomite guessed that this counted as the proof of subjugation, and they could now return back to Mondstadt. The core was of pure cryo element, contained within it. Energy and thoughts that swelled deep within the earth would eventually erupt on the surface. Even the deathly silent frost would attach to creatures on the ground, causing even the vines and branches of vegetation to become huge and fierce, attracting the hunter's gaze. But all of this had yet to happen. After the group picked up everything that seemed valuable, they finally escaped from the cold cave and left for Mondstadt. Chapter 46. Hu Tao's Side Story 1 #Harmony Hexagram Hat. Going back in time, roughly 20 minutes before the party of Kia, Yomite, and Hu Tao entered the Temple of the Wolf for the first time, to destroy the source of wind power of the Storm Terror. Yomite saw Hu Tao as he made his way up the hill, sitting atop of the highest point in the mountain in the grassy plain. That cheeky smile coated her face as usual. And weirdly, a flicker of unknown pain passed through him as he looked at the youthful face of his teammate. She was holding her hat in her hands, her long, dark brown hair swaying in the wind, as she stroked the hat in a steady rhythm, gazing at the moon. Her smile was obviously plastered on her face, yet when he looked more carefully, her expression was solemn and much darker than he had ever seen it before. She could sense him coming from miles away, despite him trying to sneak around. Assistant Kun, you're being very shoddy. Why? She turned around as she giggled. I am not trying to hide really, I just came for you. He lied as naturally as he breathed. Taking a closer look at her, he felt like this might have actually been the first time he had seen her without the hat on her head. She didn't even put it away when she was inside of the Knight's headquarters, or when she was in the room with the acting Grand Master. Usually, you would put down your hat as you enter a building. Those were the basics of courtesy in most countries. But she didn't. So it was surprising she took it off now, out of all the moments she could choose. It wasn't like they were that much in a hurry, and not like Yomite had something better to do either, so he sat down next to her and tried to strike up a conversation. That hat seems to be quite precious to you. It's my most beloved treasure, she mumbled as she stared into the distance, looking at the floating island of Celestia, hidden within the clouds. She opened up, slowly, telling him a story to fill up the deathly silence. The name of her hat was Harmony Hexagram Hat. This hat was somewhat on the hard side, and the insignia of the Wanxing funeral parlor adorned its front. It was said that this hat was passed down from the 75th director to Hu Tao. However, that director was large, muscle-bound, and had a head at least 2 sizes larger than hers. Ultimately, Hu Tao had to spend an entire day and night modifying the hat with her own 2 hands such that its dimensions would fit hers. When she met with others, she told them, "This hat is magical, upholding good and repelling evil, and is a bringer of peace." Her undertakers laughed and left it at that, but they could see the 77th director clearly did treasure that hat. No matter the rain or storm, or if Hu Tao returned late covered in muck, that hat would always remain spotless and clean. It was an artifact of the highest grade currently known as a 5-star. It didn't have any special effects, but it was a precious memento. The plum blossom that adorned the side of the hat was plucked from a rare plum tree that Hu Tao planted and grew herself. There was only one tree like that in the whole world of Teyvat, planted in her backyard. After she finished the story, she looked into the distance. "Tonight's a beautiful night, don't you think?" his companion asked as she hugged her legs, eyes of crimson focused on the night sky above. Yomite only gave her a grunt in response, still processing the story about her hat, but it seemed enough for his usually talkative companion. "It's a nice evening for ghostly pranks," she giggled, eyes alight with humor. "I wonder if I should go and scare someone. Will you come with me?" This question left him wondering, but he shook his head, saying, "We still have the quest to complete, don't you remember? We came here for that very reason. We need to go soon." Her grin faltered a bit. "Ah, that's right." She further curled up in a ball. "Geez, how can you forget stuff like that? What's wrong?" He noticed the way she was sitting didn't exactly scream happiness. Something was bothering her. "Hu Tao?" Not getting an answer from her, Yomite asked again. "Hu Tao? Earlier, you scrutinized me because I acted that way towards that little boy, Timmy. Do you hate me too?" she asked, her voice uncertain. This took him by surprise. He shook his head as a response. "No, not at all. I just disagreed with you because he's a child, and children are usually very sensitive about what you tell them. Why would you think I would hate you because of that?" "Because everyone in the US also hates me, but that's alright," she told him with a straight face. "My grandpa used to be very famous. He had numerous guests visiting during his funeral, but my funeral wouldn't have a single guest. Nobody would care if I died." She smiled wryly. Yomite twisted his lips at these words. "I don't hate you," he said resolutely, making her giggle. "Really? I seem to be getting on your nerves though. He paused, words evaporating within his throat until he could formulate words once again. "It's true that you are unbelievable at times and can easily piss me off, but there is nothing to hate about you so far. If you give me a reason, I might do so, but not right now." His gentle words created little clouds of hope. "You really mean that?" she whispered, her tone expectant. Yomite cleared his throat. "Listen, there is a huge difference between hate and occasional annoyance. The latter I can swallow after some period of time, and as for the former, it would depend on the situation." "I see, you are teaching me so much." "Thank you," she snickered, her eyes glued at him. There's little that could be said of what happened for the next 20 minutes. Both Yomite and Hu Tao continued talking and enjoyed watching the moon together. Yomite wanted to know more about his chestnut-haired friend and future companion, while Hu Tao wanted to do the same with him. She didn't know what it was about him. Maybe because, unlike the rest, he didn't hate her. Maybe because he didn't run away from her in the first 2 minutes they've known each other, as most people did. Maybe because his eyes weren't ostracizing her in any way, and instead, welcomed her for who she was, and he wasn't trying to get rid of her every few minutes. She was happy. Both learned lots of things from each other. Yomite learned about Hu Tao's hobbies. One of them was reading books and writing novels, poems and songs. Which was to his liking, as of course, he was a massive reader himself, although now that he was in a magical world, finally ready to explore things on his own instead of reading about them, he doubted he would read that often. But finding a fellow reader you could always talk to was nice. Hu Tao said that she had always loved reading since she was a small child. Curiously, when Yomite asked her what her favorite book was so that he could check it out himself, Hu Tao hesitated, before replying that she had no preferences whatsoever. He also learned small stuff like her least favorite food, something called Qingshin slime condensate. Yomite would describe the expression on her face as "blah" when she talked about its taste. He found it quite funny. And so, the time passed and passed, both getting lost in each other until Yomite found out almost half an hour had passed, and they had to go back now. As they were walking down the hill, Hu Tao spoke. Hee, I am so charming, aren't I? But to think that Assistant Kun was also into reading books. Well, I guess the saying you can't judge a book by its cover heavily applies in this context. She covered her mouth with her palm and giggled. You're shameless, you know that? Imagine calling yourself charming, and saying it out loud even, how creepy. He spoke as he formed a smile of his own. She pouted before leaning her entire weight on his shoulder. I am charming though. A young and charming director of the creepy Wangxing funeral parlor. You are. She did a creepy gesture with her hands while letting her tongue dangle out of her mouth as her eyes rolled back. It was supposed to be creepy, but he found it cute instead. Disgusting, walk properly. He. Her smug smirk didn't leave her face as she heartily laughed all the way down. The night sky was filled with gentle sounds of laughter. Kia would definitely flip out if they didn't return soon. Great, you are finally here. I thought you would bring her after a few seconds. What took you so long? Did you get lost or something? Kia asked with a frustrated tone. Yep, the woods are dangerous, and we got lost pretty easily. Yomite joked. Sure, sounds convincing enough. Alright, folks. No one makes offerings to the four winds anymore, yet the old winds never truly vanished. He touched the gate with a sense of nostalgia, the 3 ruby crystals transforming and opening the gate upon his touch. We need to clear out the temples for the four winds. Let's go in, team. Yomite nodded, and Hu Tao also voiced her agreement. Right. Okay. Chapter 47, Odd Devices. The threat was taken care of. The Cryo-Regis Fine was defeated. Their synergy was almost flawless despite this being their first battle together with all 4 of the members participating. They did a pretty good job. After all of the dropped loot was collected, Cryo-Regis Fine's humongous corpse had seemingly turned to dust, not leaving behind even a speck of it. It felt weird for a huge corpse to just dissipate like that, but the others confirmed that the bigger monsters just disappear and the smaller monsters like Hilichurl simply decomposed. That was one more thing Yomite had to write down somewhere as not to forget, as it might be useful later. Once they left the cave and walked for a bit, Yomite spotted something on top of a nearby hill he hadn't noticed before. A strange floating device, red and spherically shaped, floated eerily in the air. The red glow it emitted, like a hot star set to burn, made Yomite think that the device might not be finished or activated. What's that? He pointed at the floating device on curiosity. Stuff like that had to have been important. It looked like some futuristic weapon cannon, facing the sky. Hu Tao perked up and replied, Isn't that just one of those odd devices scattered across the world? Have you never seen one? From her tone it seemed that she was teasing him about the lack of his knowledge, just like before when he asked about Hilichurls, but he ignored that. Nope, what does it do? No one knows. They are ancient gimmicks and people go along their daily lives without really caring about them. We have them in Liyue too. No one knows what they are for. This made Yomite frown. No one knows what they do? A futuristic alien-like gadget in a fantasy world filled with swords and magic, not fitting the theme even one bit, yet no one is raising an eyebrow or two. Isn't that a tad bit suspicious? Sounds like those things might turn into an important plot device in the future. Such is the truth. As the Demon King of Salvation had stated, the truth behind the great levitating crystals is an enigma to even me, the all-knowing Prinzessin. Fiskal also explained in her own way. Even Fiskal, someone who is constantly going around the region on scout missions, has no idea. That's even weirder. He glanced at his remaining party member, Lumen, who was seemingly fidgeting, as if wanting to say something. Oh, does Lumen know something? Maybe she just doesn't want to say it out loud? Well, no matter. I will ask her later once we're alone. I have other questions I would like to ask her as well. It took them 2 more painful hours to walk back to the city of Mondstadt. All this walking was getting on his nerves. He wasn't tired, but saying it wasn't boring and draining would be a lie. He knew there probably weren't things like fast travel from Assassin's Creed, teleports, or something like a recall spell that would instantly transmit you home, but they would be currently greatly appreciated. Couldn't there be horses or mounts or some other form of transportation at least? Damn that storm terror in Varka, they are ruining everything. Once they finally arrived, the party split up into smaller groups. Lumen and Paimon went to deliver Godwin's letter to the woman called Glory as promised. They first had to look around for her, and ask people in the city about her whereabouts though. Hu Tao and Fiscal went to buy some snacks and headed into the inn. Yomite went to check in with the guild to get the promised juicy rewards from the defeated Cryo Regis Vine. More than 1 million mora? From one boss fight? That was simply too great to be ignored. Catherine was happy that the request was done so swiftly, but warned him that the next time he goes to collect the reward from a commission, the other party members should be present to verify the bonus for the party of 4 rewards. She pardoned it this time as she saw that all 4 of them returned together, but he shouldn't forget that for the future. Yomite thanked her and got his rewards. Their party level had also risen to AR2 from AR0. He also had to go and buy a new claymore as the one he had before shattered in his hands. He wasn't sure if it was because it wasn't of a high quality, or just because the Cryo Regis Vine was that durable, but either way, he had to get a new one. Preferably even stock up on the shitty quality ones until he found a weapon of a better quality for himself. The city of Mondstadt. Knights of Favonius headquarters. Lisa. Picking up the slight question-like intonation Jean used to call her name, the librarian raised her eyes from the book she was lazily skimming over and stared straight at the acting Grand Master. Jean shifted on her chair, uncomfortable, lifting her weight with one hand firmly gripping on the chair's armrest, and half a dozen paper sheets in the other. She looked rather puzzled at best. However, years of friendship allowed Jean to know she would not need to wait for any sound of acknowledgement from Lisa, so she just kept talking. Have you found anything about the weird crimson crystal? Something we can use? The question itself made the librarian perk up slightly, but she soon shook her head in denial. Unfortunately not, my dear. I've been skimming through hundreds of books in the past few days and couldn't find anything yet. Don't worry, my dear. I will eventually find it. I trust you, but be sure not to overexert yourself too much, Jean whispered with her tender voice. Lisa nodded her head and then waved her hand in the air as if to wave away her friend's worries. Dear, it feels weird when you of all people are telling me to rest. The storm terror issue is at hand. Do you think I can just sleep in my library as I always do? Thanks, Lisa. I'm really grateful. Don't mind me, but you should be the one getting some sleep. You haven't had a proper rest since Grand Master Varka left half a year ago. She mumbled, but her words no longer reached her, as she was busy scanning her gaze through the stacks of paperwork on her desk. Chapter 48. Couldn't you have said that sooner, woman? After buying 2 low-quality claymores from the blacksmith, Yomite decided to look around the city a bit to see if there was anything that could pique his interest. From novels, he remembered that markets were usually rich with stories and legends of the inhabitants over the years. And so he asked around, and people were happy to oblige. Over the centuries, the society of Mondstadt had become overly aggressive and violent, to the point where it was feared by everyone. Tyrants had taken over the city of Mondstadt in the past, claiming people as their own property. Luckily, a light of freedom healed the city of its corruption, and thanks to the god, Barbatos, the citizens were saved. From then on, Mondstadt became the city of freedom. Barbatos HM. It's that guy again. Markets were also a great place to get to know about rumors. Have you heard? Ever since that bard, Venti, came back, Six-Fingered Jose is crestfallen. Yeah, apparently all of his fans turned their back on him and went to Venti instead. Feels bad. Venti's voice is just so soothing though. Hard to believe that Brad isn't a girl. Well, whole is a whole, my friend. That's a dangerous way of thinking. I like it. Of course. We are in the city of freedom after all. Now, it's time to tend to some kitties. Yeah. Both of the men cheered and entered a tavern called Cat's Tail, leaving Yomite speechless. A hole is a hole. That was indeed a very dangerous way of thinking. Forgetting something like this had transpired, he resumed his journey through the streets. The shops weren't exactly bustling with people, and there weren't that many of them either. Could be because of the Storm Terror's threat, but he didn't know for sure. As he walked through the market, he noticed the strong smell from an open flower booth, so he had to stop while he looked at the flowers nearby. What the hell are these? He couldn't recognize a single flower, meaning that all of them were unique flowers of this world. After exploring around for a bit, he found actual treasure chests all around the city. Can I take these? Is it like stealing? Did someone leave them here on purpose, or what is happening? Why are there treasure chests hidden in the city? It doesn't make sense. He decided to collect the stuff inside for now, and would probably keep it to himself unless someone came complaining directly to his doorstep or something. This world is weird. And soon enough, much to his surprise and dismay, he found 2 more of those alien-shaped devices inside of the city. But this time, both of the devices were generating a dark blue color instead of red, and this led him to believe they were activated. Straightening up his posture, he gave one of the devices a nice firm touch. And nothing happened. He frowned. I should probably ask someone like Jean to answer my questions regarding those things. Or maybe if I can find someone smart. Now that I think about it, that librarian beauty Lisa might be able to answer some of my questions. These things are like landmines in a human settlement. It's weird for people to simply ignore them. Resigned, he leaned on the device, deeply contemplating. He could almost feel the device mocking him, briefly letting him lean on it before it would explode or something. Ugly tattoo is here. Soon enough, he heard the excited voice of the little fairy from his party. Tilting his head, he was met with Lumen, who also greeted him. Hello, party leader. For some people, the little fairy might have been seen as a nuisance, but he had to put that aside for the end result. Granted, the little fairy wasn't able to fight for him during the quests. But despite having no combat ability, she could presumably either turn invisible or disappear to some unknown dimension, which could be useful for many things. She was also very cute. And to top it all off, she knew how to raise the spirit of the party without much difficulty, and things like that were very important. She was something akin to a mascot in a sense. To him, it was like having a little pet again, and he loved pets. Hey you guys, I assume you've delivered the letter without a hitch then? That's right. Paimon read it out loud for her, and Glory was so happy she started crying tears of joy. See how amazing Paimon is? Yes. Paimon is amazing. Hee hee. With a gleeful squeal, she wiggled in the air. Praising her definitely put her in a good mood. Now that you're here, we have some time to talk. I will ask you this. He knocked onto the metallic surface of the alien-shaped device and continued. I am pretty sure you have some rough idea about what this is, correct? I am a bit interested about it too, you see. I'm not so sure about others, but I'm able to transport myself through them. Yomite's eyes lit up. Transport? As in teleporting. Party leader, is something the matter? No. Just spit it out at this point. How many powers do you even have? Lumen looked troubled, but now that she knew she could depend on him, and that he would help her with finding her brother, she decided it wasn't fair to keep it only to herself. I can warp myself between these devices and the statues of the 7. I have a special holographic map, where key points of the map are saved. I have a place where I can put infinite items into, and things that are put inside will never expire as they are stopped in time. Silence enveloped the place. It was about 4 p.m., the sky was clear, and the winds were blowing steadily. There was nothing but the cool breeze moving through the tree branches. But soon, formerly loud sounds of the day had been swallowed by a hysterical laughter, coming from one of the rooftops. Seriously? Are you joking with me? 4 hours. 4 hours of wasting time, walking up the hill and carrying equipment. Couldn't you have said that sooner, woman? We could have done the quest within minutes. And also, what is up with those broken abilities? Teleportation, holographic map, and an inventory. Isn't that a bit overboard? At this point I wouldn't be surprised if you had a status ability of your own. Yeesh. Paimon's small figure quickly disappeared out of fright, leaving Lumen alone with him. Lumen's gaze was conflicted. She resolved herself and spoke yet again. About that, I actually have. Please, don't say another word. Yomite cut her off. He had enough. He truly had enough. Party leader, are you mad? I was thinking of telling the rest of the party too. A voice echoed on top of a rooftop, correctly guessing what Yomite was feeling in his heart. No, it's fine. At least I know now. Don't let it get to you. It was just a small and momentary outburst of mine. He shook his head and sighed. Let's just go to the inn and regroup with others. I am still wondering how they will react to this news if you were to tell them. Sheesh, status 2, I can't even view my own. Yes. He wasn't sure whether it was a good idea to tell them yet, but the decision was solely on her, not him. He was just slightly jealous, that's all. And as for me, I don't really see the need to reveal myself for now. Although some people have seen my cube ability, no one will ever know about my story ability or the last observed spell that I have yet to figure out how to activate. Goodness, there is so much stuff to do, mastering the offensive cube spell, getting better with the story ability, and figuring out how to utilize the observe. He knew that he had been truly graced to have such abilities, body and a new life for absolutely free, but compared to what Lumen had. I admit my cheats are great, but she has a cheat set deluxe edition under her belt. Unbelievable. In any case, once I am free, I will need to figure out how the observe works. Upon entering the inn and walking into their room, Yomite saw that surprisingly, Fiscal was hitting it off with Hu Tao. And that was a good thing. For the most part. Hey, I've read that before. Oh, did thou now, magnificent. Art thou well versed in the art of poetry then? Yep. I write poetry of my own. You also seem like you've read a lot of classics. Why, yes, I am quite the avid enjoyer of classic literature. Fiscal stated, feeling proud. It seems like you are getting along pretty well. Yomite's voice interrupted them from behind. The duo looked back and welcomed them. Assistant Queen. Hu Tao waved at him. Humph. It's only natural for the queen to get to know her subjects better. Fiscal covered half of her face with her hand, acting mysteriously. Queen? Weren't you a princess or something? Yomite questioned. Why, you know what I meant. Chapter 49. Terrible, terrible night. The afternoon had passed. It was currently night time. Everyone was getting ready to sleep. Fiscal said her goodbyes in her natural fashion, and left. Hu Tao already fell asleep in her clothes like a dead log by the time Yomite had finished his shower, snoring away loudly like a middle-aged man after working a 9-to-5 job, or like a drunkard after mixing drinks and ending up wasted. Well, it was certainly true that the hyperactive individuals fell asleep a lot quicker than others after expending all of their energy. Lumen and Paimon pulled out cute pajamas from somewhere. Not somewhere. It was that freaking inventory, damn it. I am not jealous. The feeling of bed was heavenly. The clouds of pain and exhaustion that had clouded his head for several days were finally fading. The pain had subsided well into the background, and he laid luxuriantly on his back. His arms were flung over his head while his legs were stretched out onto the bed. He closed his eyes shut, quietly departing to the dreamland. He expected to wake up relaxed, to the new day, but instead, he woke up in the middle of the night, wondering how long he had slept. The room should have been silent, and it should be late at night. He turned around, to face a wall. At this moment, he heard a sound come from the corner of the room. Ugh, ugh. That sound was really loud in this quiet room. Hearing this sound, he shifted his gaze to a corner of the room. He let his eyes adjust to the darkness. In that corner of the room was Lumen's bed. The weird sounds were coming from there. It was as if someone was suffocating, or had trouble breathing. He gulped unconsciously. Cold sweat kept breaking out. He wasn't scared or anything. It was just a bit weird. What was going on? Was Lumen dying or something? Unwillingly, he stood up and left his warm bed, afraid his companion might suffocate to death. He slowly walked to her, and that's when he saw the source of the sound. It was Paimon. She was being squeezed by Lumen a little bit too much, having trouble breathing. Yomite put away the hand that was squeezing her, letting her escape. She gazed at him with a face that seemed to be saying, I owe you one good tattoo, and disappeared somewhere else, into another dimension. He sighed. Geez, I got scared for nothing. Let's just go back to bed in. Huh. As soon as he turned around, in the corner of the room, stood something, gazing at him with its crimson-red eyes shining in the darkness. He was frozen in place, and the only words that tumbled out of his mouth were, What the fuck? Yet the figure stood still, unmoving, not responding, still staring at him without blinking. It took him a moment to realize that the figure had a very familiar appearance of someone from his party. A girl, with chestnut brown hair and deep red eyes containing bright flower-shaped pupils. Jesus, Hu Tao! That's terrifying. You scared the living crap out of me. What the hell are you doing there? Just silently standing. Say something. Don't be creepy. This isn't funny. If this is one of your pranks, then there is time and place for that shit. He slowly walked up to her and hesitantly shook her shoulders. This was straight up like from a B-tier horror movie. And what did he learn from horror movies? Black people obviously died first. Since he was partially black, this curse might be encoded in his DNA. But he wasn't just gonna run away. That would be pathetic of him. He paid for this place after all. Where would he sleep? After not getting any response from her, he waved his hand in front of her eyes, yet they weren't focused one bit. They were open the whole time. She didn't blink a single time. If that wasn't creepy enough, she was directly turning her head, following him whenever he moved. Okay, listen here. If you don't stop, you are going to have to sleep outside. I'm sorry, but I am not falling asleep with a creep in a room. Once again, no response. Looking closely, her eyes were getting wet from her, not closing her eyes for so long. Until finally, tears welled up in her eyes. Is she actually sleepwalking? That might explain it, I guess. It's really uncomfortable though. I need to do something about it. He walked up to her again, this time, picking her up and putting her on her bed, hoping that would fix the issue. He laid back down on his bed and closed his eyes, dozing off. It wasn't before long that he felt something near him. He wanted to open his eyes, but something like his sixth sense was holding him back. What the hell should I do? I am too bothered by it. It will be scary if I open my eyes, but the same could be said if I didn't open them. After considering it for a moment, he made up his mind to open his eyes slightly. Just a tiny little bit. Still, curiosity got the best of him, and he looked. Curiosity killed the cat, they say. And he locked eyes with the figure that was staring at his face, this time dangerously close, standing right next to his bed, looking down at him as if it was the most natural thing to do during the night. Aya! Fuck Hu Tao! Get it together! Wake up! He screamed as if he was squeezing his psyche dry. He was never a fan of horror or jump scare genres, and this encounter almost stopped his heart and sent him back to Goddess Sia immediately. For some reason Lumen was sleeping comfortably, not bothered by the sudden scream. He wondered if that was another one of her cheats, sleeping soundly. Ultimately, he had decided to ignore Hu Tao altogether. It couldn't be that bad, right? She would eventually go to sleep, right? But she didn't. He shrieked internally. Seconds, minutes, an hour had passed, yet he could clearly see her shadow while looking at the wall, illuminated by the moon. She's still there. She didn't move an inch. At this point I'm actually getting scared. He was thinking of numerous worst-case scenarios, all of which lead to his death. Not being able to hold it in anymore, he stood up and tried to forcefully get her into her bed again. However, no matter how many times he tried putting her to sleep, she stood up and stared at him from up close once more. Ultimately, he spent the whole night like this, not getting any sleep. Chapter 50, Cursed by a Medusa. Mondstadt. The morning of another day. At the inn, Yomite, who had just woken up, was still wondering about what happened earlier that night. That was really creepy. I couldn't get a wink of sleep. As he yawned, he glanced around to see Lumen and Paimon still sleeping soundly, and the culprit behind him not getting a wink of sleep. Hu Tao was currently writing something into her book on top of her bed. Presumably, the novel she was talking about before, or some kind of poem. One day he will convince her to let him read it. Still, it seemed like she had finally awakened from that weird sleepwalking state. This night was horrible. The next time that happens, she is sleeping outside. He hoped to whichever god there is, that this will never ever happen again. Now let's finally sleep. He felt comfortable lying on the bed just like that, hugging his pillow, until he heard a weird noise coming from downstairs. Wait! You can't just go up. Please! One shall go wherever one shall please. What the heck was happening? Squeaky footsteps from the wooden staircase were slowly getting closer and closer until they stopped in front of his room. At this moment, thumps were heard. Someone outside was knocking on his door. The knocks were quite loud and were definitely done by hammering the door with a lot of strength. Yomite frowned as he looked around his party, wondering if anyone was going to answer the door, but Lumen simply hugged Paimon and turned to the other side of her bed, and Hu Tao wasn't responding at all. It was as if she was still unresponsive since the night. Yomite guessed who it was and pretended not to hear it. He also chose Lumen's tactic as viable and decided to hug the wall instead. The bed was way too comfortable to go and answer the door right now. After the person knocked a few more times, the clinking of the doorknob could be heard, and the door was suddenly opened. Yomite widened his eyes at the person who came in. He knew that it would be her, yet he didn't expect she would be this brazen in entering the room. They could have been naked or something. Did she not care, or was she simply ignorant about stuff like that? Seeing Yomite's startled face, Fiscal cleared out her throat and laughed with a smile. Prinzessin der Veritiling has arrived! As unexpected as the morning daylight. Dusk and dawn, but fleeting shadows are. Let us embark on a journey. Once more, the twists of fate have led me into your everlasting night, gracing this room with glory. She paused as she panned across the room. It was clearly already 10 a.m., yet everyone was in their bed, and none of them looked battle-ready. What was going on? Fiscal woke up at 4 a.m. as always, feeling refreshed. She wanted to have some time for herself, so she walked out of her house that was devoid of her parents, closed the door, and looked around. At this time, Yomite was still busy fighting with sleepwalking Hu Tao, hours and hours to no end, but no one bore witness to that, unfortunately. It was still dark, and the only person around was a tall, crimson red-haired man, sweeping the front of his tavern. The Tavern of Angels' Share. Other than that, she noticed that the Adventurers Guild was already fully operating. It was quite admirable how dedicated and responsible the administrative members of the Adventurers Guild were. Everyone seemed to be in position even before dawn broke, standing with friendly smiles that eased people into freely spilling any and all troubles plaguing them at the moment. Spring was close. She could feel it in the air. It was currently the winter season, yet no snow was visible. It's been a long time since it snowed in Mondstadt. Maybe around 20 years. She had only personally seen snow in Dragon's Pine, which was a tall, cold mountain full of snow that just simply wouldn't melt. She greeted the person in front of her with her usual greatness. Hail, mortal! Not that the illusory passage of time has any bearing on one such as I, to whom the causality of 3,000 universes has been unveiled. However, the man only responded with an annoyed grunt and continued sweeping. Fiscal was used to the fact that people ignored her, but she didn't give up. One day, she shall show the world the greatness that she was. Well, one such as I see that you are busy with the cliché mortal life, so I shall bid you farewell. With that, she turned around and went for a walk outside of the city gates. The man's name was Dilek, the owner of Angel's Share. He was currently silently staring at her parting figure. What was that all about? I stayed silent because I had no idea what she wanted from me. Mondstadt is becoming weirder with each passing day. He shook his head and resumed his duty. About 6 hours later. Present time. What is this conspiracy? Who poisoned you with the essence of the Medusa? Raise up, my dear soldiers of stone, and heed my summon. Let me crack the curse laid upon thy bodies. Fiscal was desperately raising her trembling hands across the people in the room, but to no avail. Swish. Hu Tao turned to another page of her book and continued writing, and Lumen put a pillow over her ears, snuggling Paimon even closer, almost squashing her again. At this point, Yomite felt bad for Paimon. Being a mascot was hard. Do your best. He silently prayed within his heart. Of course, Fiscal's confrontation ended up a failure. Her plans were foiled once more. Yomite turned slightly awkward. Good morning, Fiscal, you came? Fiscal conveniently sat down on his bed. What in the tarnation is going on over here? Yesterday, we succeeded in taking down the evil spiritual flower of the glacial god itself. The morale should be at its peak, yet now it seems as if all lives and hopes are lost. Raise up! There is a whole world outside to explore. Mein Fräulein, I believe that your companions are currently resting. Let's come back again later. Oz materialized and greeted Yomite. Hello there, Sir Yomite. Good morning. Good morning to you too, Oz. Oz stared at him with his sharp purple pupils and quickly arrived at the conclusion that Yomite didn't have much sleep during the night for some reason. His eyes had black circles underneath. It seemed like he spent the entire night awake. But Oz, Fiscal protested. Her energy was fully recharged. She was all ready to depart. Well, if I may suggest something, we can maybe play some card games and relax today. What do you say, Mein Fräulein? Oh, I heard that there is this new game called Pharaoh. Someone from Sumeru apparently came up with it, and it's fairly popular in the US too. Should we try that? What do you say, Mein Fräulein? Oz's constant barrage of questions left Fiscal in a desolate state. Did she want to play? Nonsense. She was a highly skilled adventurer. The best scout out there. She did gaze somewhat longingly at the younger kids playing outside sometimes, though. However, the prinzessin had no time for such things, she mused. Of course she was tempted to play games with her newfound friends, as she never really socialized in her life without being mocked or experienced something like this. But currently she wanted to go on an adventure with everyone. Humph. Playing games is far too childish. But I shall give it a try. Asterisk. 10 hours later. Ha! I won once more! Fiscal gave off a hearty laugh as she pulled a stack of chips to her side of the table. This was the most fun she has ever had. Forget the childishness of games. It was so much fun. Not fair! You saw Paymon's cards again. Paimon can't hold as many cards as you can in Paymon's small hands. This is unfair. There were only a few chips on Paymon's side, so she obviously wasn't happy, nor was she winning. The group was relaxing and only playing games throughout the whole day. They didn't even step outside of the room, not counting the time Yomite ordered food and drinks and pee breaks. And just like that, it was already deep into the night. The moment seemed like it would never end, but for some reason, Yomite felt like he forgot about something. Well, shouldn't be that important in any case. He mused. All in. Yomite confidently declared, making the surrounding players frown. Party leader, bully, folding. Fold, fold. This one shall fold. Ugh, bad tattoo, folding. Amidst the branches of the most beautiful and the tallest tree the world of Teyvat had ever seen, stood a bard, staring at the moon with a complex gaze. Did they forget it was tonight? No, they are dependable people with power. I should probably wait a bit more, they may be busy. It wouldn't be until 2 hours later that Yomite remembered a certain bard wanted to meet both him and Lumen tonight.
Akira here, this is the end of part 2. If you enjoyed the story, we would appreciate it if you liked the video. Also, please support the original author for this amazing work. I have put their Patreon and the web novel link in the description. Thank you and have a great day.